The one who retreated the most was Ling Han. After all, his basic power was slightly inferior to Hu Yang's, but it was really only a slight difference. The entire venue was silent at first, but in just an instant, a huge uproar erupted. With just one exchange, they had really gotten a shock. Ling Han had advanced into the blood transformation tier, and he even possessed the strength to directly contend against a fifth change. One had to know that although Hu Yang had made a fool of himself, and his popularity and reputation had fallen to rock bottom, that didn't deny his strength. He was a prodigy, and had once cultivated to 20 meridians in the meridian opening tier. However, Ling Han was only a first change now, but he could match him. How could this be believed? Could it be that Ling Han's blood and qi was already boiling? That was impossible. The boiling of blood and qi had extremely obvious characteristics, and Ling Han showed no signs of it at all. What the hell? Hu Yang himself was naturally even more shocked. Only now did he understand why Ling Han dared to accept the challenge a second time. This time, there were no conspiracies or traps that had been laid. They were just fighting head-on. The others also realized this, but they all had a strong sense of unaccustomedness. Ling Han was not laying out a trap and using tricks, but rather having a head-on clash. How awkward, they couldn't accept this. After the shock, Hu Yang calmed down. There was a limit to the meridian opening tier. At most, one could reach the second limit, which was 500,000 kilograms of mystical power and 500,000 kilograms of physical power. After advancing into the blood transformation tier, one's mystical power would undergo a great increase. So it was not unusual for Ling Han to possess more than 1,000,000 kilograms of raw power. The second limit. He was so jealous that he was about to go crazy. Previously, only one person had achieved it. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for a second Hong Tianbu to appear. But now, he had no choice but to believe that another freakish genius had appeared. However, even if this kid had 750,000 kilograms of mystical power, after his blood and qi boiled, he could only reach 2,000,000 kilograms of strength. In addition to his physical power, he could at most reach 2.5 million kilograms. And what about him? 3.5 million kilograms. This was still a crushing advantage. Hu Yang nodded. He had never expected to defeat Ling Han in his normal state. Then, he would directly have a battle of their strongest states. He roared as his blood and qi boiled. A crystal-like aura enveloped him, as if it was flickering. Come! He roared and attacked with the destruction claw. The force alone was enough to tear through steel plates. Ling Han humphed, and his blood and qi also boiled. His blood instantly circulated in his body at a speed 10 times faster than before, and an incomparably powerful force surged through his entire body. He still used the demonic monkey fists to meet Hu Yang's claw. Bang! The fist and palm collided again. This time, the fist still blocked the claw. Impossible! Hu Yang's face was filled with disbelief. He had calculated it very accurately. Ling Han's explosive power should be far inferior to his own. But with this claw strike, Ling Han had not been easily knocked down, and his hands were not injured at all either. How was this possible? Not to mention power, he had practiced the destruction claw for more than 20 years. Now, he could not even break the other party's skin. Not only Hu Yang, but the others were the same. They had clearly seen Hu Yang boil his blood and qi, but why was Ling Han not inferior at all, and was even able to match him? Simple. Ling Han grasped the frequency of Hu Yang's attacks. The rhythm of the 15 overlapping layers of power was incomparably ingenious, completely dissolving the power that Hu Yang had unleashed. This was called the frequency technique by Ling Han. As long as he caught the frequency pulse, he would be able to defeat a stronger opponent. Of course, there was also a limit to the strength of this technique. Hu Yang, I don't know you at all, but you first took advantage of your seniority to come to the new student area to trample on me. After I chased you off, you even ignored the fact that you were bullying the weak and challenged me to a battle. You still haven't learned your lesson after being taught a lesson by me? And now you're here again. Ling Han humphed. Another punch was thrown. Pong Hu Yang parried it, and his face was slightly pale. It was not because he had been injured by the punch, but because Ling Han's words had struck a sore spot. You're really despicable. Do you really want me to beat you harshly? Ling Han continued to throw punches. Bang. All right. I'll fulfill your wish. Bang. I'll beat you to death, you bastard. Bang. Every word Ling Han said was followed by a punch, one punch after another like a thunderstorm. The more he spoke, the angrier he became. After coming to this unfamiliar world, the Empress and the others could only hide within his body, and he didn't know when they would be able to come out. He already had a belly full of anger, yet Hu Yang just had to provoke him time and time again. Alright, he had a place to vent his anger. Pung 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 pung. Ling Han's attack speed became faster and faster. Even most blood transformation tier elites could only see his fists flying in the sky, as if the entire sky was filled with his fist imprints. They couldn't help but be shocked. How could such an attack be blocked? The more Hu Yang fought, the more flustered he became. He felt that his strength had the upper hand, but the other party's strength was extremely condensed. It was as if his attack was a mountain made of mud, easily punched through with his opponent's stone fist, and he himself could not cause any damage. He regretted it again. If he had known earlier, he would not have restricted the use of spirit tool and talisman weapons, because he also had talisman weapons of the extreme bone tier, refined by his father. Wasn't that just digging his own grave? When he had the upper hand in terms of abilities, he had been defeated by Ling Han's talisman weapon with a single blow. Alright, when he had restricted the use of talisman weapons, Ling Han's abilities had increased, and were enough to rival his own. In fact, there was even a faint tendency to suppress him. Why was his fate so tragic? Ling Han let out a long cry, and continued to raise his battle prowess. If 15 layers of power could not deal with his opponent, then 20 layers would do. Ling Han suddenly increased his strength. Pung, with a single strike, Hu Yang was instantly sent flying. He could only unleash 15 layers of power. Previously, he had coincidentally fought Ling Han to a draw. Now that Ling Han had increased his power, he was naturally no match for him. Bang! Ling Han seized the opportunity to follow up with another punch. Hu Yang barely managed to block it, but he was sent flying again by this punch. Feels good, doesn't it? Ling Han gave chase with a big stride, almost bursting out at twice the speed of sound, making one's eyes go wide. 2 times the speed of sound, that was a speed that only extreme bone tier elites could achieve, yet it could be seen on a person who had just entered the blood transformation tier. It had to be known that most blood transformation tier elites could only reach the speed of sound when they reached the 3rd change, mainly because their physiques could not withstand it. When they reached the speed of sound, their bodies would first fall apart. Bang! 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 Hu Yang became a sandbag, and was bombarded by Ling Han to his heart's content. He had neutralized most of Ling Han's attacks, but there was still remaining energy in the attacks that smashed into his body, causing him pain. In the long run, he might even be injured, heavily injured, and eventually die. Everyone could see that although Hu Yang was still holding on, he had already lost. It was just that he had yet to admit it. This time, no one doubted Ling Han's abilities anymore. Not only was this guy shameless, but his true strength was also heaven-defying. Ling Han had proven himself in one battle. On the other hand, Hu Yang was in a miserable state. He had been defeated 3 times by Ling Han. Regardless of whether it was in terms of intelligence or abilities, he had been crushed in all aspects. He was destined to become a huge joke. Stop, Tu Yun said. He couldn't stand it anymore. This was no longer a decisive battle, but a one-sided beating. Everyone looked at Ling Han with incomparably complicated gazes. A new star had already gradually risen, and could no longer be suppressed. Ling Han became famous after a single battle. Indeed, he was also very famous previously. He had defeated Hu Yang twice, but there were factors that were not based on his abilities. Naturally, he could not convince the public that he had truly deserved the win. But this time it was completely different. Ling Han had defeated Hu Yang head-on, without the slightest bit of doubt. This world worshipped elites, and although Ling Han could not yet be called an elite, it was already clear that was the direction he was heading. Quite a few people were analyzing Ling Han's strength and studying how he could be so strong. However, from the perspective of strength, They could not come up with a reasonable explanation no matter how they thought about it, to explain how Ling Han could match Hu Yang. In the end, everyone determined that Ling Han must have mastered a powerful martial arts technique to make up for the difference in power. Because Ling Han had come from Huju City, and Huju City had already disappeared, many forces had the intention of recruiting him, offering all kinds of conditions. Some used money, some used cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques to tempt him, and some directly gifted beauties. Naturally, none of them could move Ling Han. He was not short of money and was not interested in beauties. As for cultivation techniques, how many people could offer him a cultivation technique that surpassed Brother Monkey cultivation technique? He could take a look at the martial arts techniques and use them as a reference, but to sell himself in exchange. Haha! Ling Han returned to his residence. He did not plan to meet anyone. Since he had advanced into the blood transformation tier, he would need blood transformation tier medicinal pills and cultivation formations from now on. He also needed to prepare more treasured fruits to replenish high qi and blood, so that he would not have to stagnate after reaching the peak stage of first change because he did not have any supplements. That night, Ling Han was planning to concoct alchemical pills when he suddenly felt a sense of uneasiness. He quickly turned around and saw a figure sitting in the shadows. Ga, brat. Your senses are getting more and more sensitive, the figure laughed. Ling Han's eyesight had also improved greatly, and his pupils quickly adapted to the darkness. He could vaguely see that it was a short old geezer. His pupils immediately constricted. This little old man was the one who had fed him poison. Brat! I've really underestimated you, the little old man said with a smile. In such a short period of time, you've already rushed up to the blood transformation tier, and you've even defeated that kid from the Hu clan. Ling Han carefully observed this little old man, but he still gave him an unfathomable feeling. He was definitely an extreme bone tier elite. He believed that if he unleashed his full strength, he would be able to match the extreme bone tier's first level, but it would only be for a short 10 minutes. Once the boiling of his blood and qi ended, he would definitely be blasted into smithereens by an extreme bone tier. This little old man was definitely not at the first level of extreme bone tier. What about using a weapon nurturing leaf? Ling Han shook his head in his heart. Although he had 3 patterned leaves, the third pattern had only just formed, and there was still a distance away from being completely matured. He would only be able to unleash the power of the first or second stage of extreme bone tier, which would still not be able to threaten this old geezer. Brat, do you want to use the weapon nurturing leaf to deal with me? The little old man smiled. This old man knew that he had the weapon nurturing leaf. As expected, this matter could not be hidden. It was just that the academy did not call him to account, which could be considered as admitting his strength and luck. The question was, how did the little old man know? What did he have to do with the academy? Thoughts flashed in Ling Han's mind, but a smile appeared on his face, and he said calmly, even if I use it, it's impossible for me to hurt you, old man. Ha ha. Brat, you're really becoming more and more likable, the little old man said with a smile. He pointed at Ling Han and said, I spared your life back then because I saw that you still had some accomplishments in alchemy. I didn't think that your talent in martial arts would be even more astonishing. He nodded. It seems that my decision back then was very correct. You cultivate diligently, and I will fight to get you a mission. If you complete it well, you will slowly gain trust. In the future, you will have a chance to participate in promoting and establishing the power over this world. Ling Han sneered in his heart. Having used poison to control him, and he still wanted him to sell himself into slavery? This was the capital. All the resources in the world were gathered here. As long as he had enough money, he would definitely be able to find the remaining medicinal ingredients and concoct the antidote for the soul-departing pill. Senior, can you give me your name? He asked. The little old man hesitated slightly before saying, My surname is Chang. As for what my name is, I've already forgotten. He turned around and jumped out of the window, instantly disappearing into the moonlight. Ling Han thought to himself that he also possessed 2 times the speed of sound. If he really wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality, it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape from the hands of an extreme bone tier, However, if he wanted to fight and win an opponent like that now, he was dreaming. However, once I reach the third change, or even the second change, I should have the qualifications to match the first stage of the extreme bone tier. Ling Han thought to himself. The old geezer's appearance alerted him, reminding him that there was a rope around his neck that could strangle him at any time. This kind of feeling made Ling Han extremely displeased. Thus, his first step was to earn money, a lot of money, in order to buy the medicinal ingredients needed to concoct the antidote. However, before he could start refining pills, someone else came. This time, the visitor did not enter without informing him. Instead, Huan Shui informed him of the request for a meeting. It was Butler Mu. If it were anyone else, Ling Han wouldn't be in the mood to meet them now. But if it was Butler Mu, he still had to give him face. Ling Han, you're really shocking. Butler Mu had long since recovered from his injuries, and his face was full of emotion. After defeating Hu Yang, those factions with some abilities have probably heard of your name. Ling Han sighed in his heart. Of course, hadn't that old geezer with the surname Chung already come? He smiled and said, Is Miss Feng all right now? Young Miss is doing very well now. Butler Mu smiled like a kind father, full of comfort. Ling Han shook his head inwardly as he watched. This Butler Mu was really completely enraptured, treating Feng Ruoxian like his own daughter. Forget it, this was someone else's choice, as long as you were happy. Although His Majesty, the Holy Emperor, hasn't come out of seclusion yet, as the representative of Huju City, young Miss has an extraordinary significance. She will definitely be favored by the Holy Emperor in the future. Butler Mu continued, but his expression suddenly darkened. Young Miss has been getting very close to the princes. In his opinion, Feng Ruoxian shouldn't have to marry into the royal family. Although she could obtain a great status, it was impossible for her to obtain happiness. Furthermore, the royal family was fighting for the throne. Once the Holy Emperor passed away in the future, no matter which prince took the throne, there would definitely be a huge reckoning. Hence, it was better to marry into an ordinary family. Although it was ordinary, it was also safe. Ling Han didn't interrupt. He didn't have much of a relationship with Feng Ruoxian to begin with, so whatever decision she made was her business. This time I came. Butler Mu hesitated and paused for a moment before saying, Young Miss has just arrived in the capital and is unfamiliar with the place. She doesn't have anyone that she can really use, so I want to ask you to help her more. Ling Han was astounded. Help? To put it nicely, wasn't it just to take him in as a servant? With Ling Han's current reputation, if Feng Ruoxian could take him in as a servant, then her status in the imperial capital would greatly increase. However, where did Feng Ruoxian's confidence come from? She actually wanted him to be her servant? You're too thick-skinned, aren't you? Do I owe you anything? Ling Han did not owe Feng Ruoxian anything. On the contrary, he had even saved her once. Otherwise, she might already be helping Hu Can with the reproduction of his clan. Alright, it was fine if she wasn't grateful. On account of Feng Zixing's death in the city, Ling Han didn't want to hold it against her. But now, she actually wanted to take him in as a slave. This was something that Ling Han couldn't tolerate. Even if you're still the young miss of a powerful family, you don't have the right to do so. What an ingrate. Butler Mu saw the change in his expression and hurriedly advised, Ling Han, young miss needs help right now. Please help young miss on my account. Ling Han shook his head and said, Butler Mu, this request is too much. Forgive me for being unable to comply. Actually, Butler Mu had also guessed that Ling Han would not agree. Which peerless genius would be willing to be someone's servant? It was just that he had been entrusted by Feng Ruoxian and had no choice but to make a trip. Ling Han, if you have any conditions, you can raise them. I will try my best to satisfy you, he said. Ling Han shook his head and said, This is a matter of principle. Butler Mu sighed and said, All right, pretend I never said anything about this. He quickly bade farewell and left. In truth, Feng Ruoxian had asked him to use civility before resorting to force. If Ling Han was unwilling to listen to advice, then he was to directly threaten him. Feng Ruoxian could say this, but Butler Mu couldn't. His life was saved by Ling Han, so how could he repay his kindness with ingratitude? To be honest, he really felt like he didn't know Feng Ruoxian anymore. He had watched this child grow up. How did she become like this now? What he didn't know was that although Feng Ruoxian looked glamorous now and was shrouded in a halo, how long could the blessings of a dead person last? When the matter of Huju City came to an end and no one mentioned it again, what was she, Feng Ruoxian, worth? With only beauty, she could only become a plaything. Therefore, Feng Ruoxian had to think of ways to increase her strength and walk down this crooked path. Ling Han sent Butler Mu off and shook his head. He had already blacklisted Feng Ruoxian. Otherwise, with his protective personality, since they were all from Huju City, he would definitely not hesitate to help Feng Ruoxian if she encountered any difficulties. Now that Feng Ruoxian had done this, it was equivalent to closing this door for herself. Ling Han stopped thinking about this matter. There was no need to waste time on such an ungrateful young miss. However, this was destined to be a busy night. There was a third guest whom he couldn't refuse. Niu Huaqing was the owner of There's a Formations Shop and the uncle of Gu Tianhe from the Huju City Formations Association. His title was a little long and scary. Ling Han was indebted to this person, so Ling Han naturally wouldn't ignore him. However, Ling Han had no reservations in his manner towards the man at all, and said with a smile, "Old geezer Niu, you survived a great disaster." Niu Huaqing snorted and said, "It's just a small beast tide. How can it do anything to me? Just continue to boast." Ling Han thought to himself, if Niu Huaqing could really ignore the beast tide, how could the entire Formations Association be wiped out? Oh no, there was still Yan Jun who had run out, and whom he had yet to finish off. He did not rub salt into his wounds. He smiled and said, "Are you planning to open another Formations shop in the capital?" Niu Huaqing revealed a complicated expression and said, "I originally thought that I would never return here in my life." He paused for a moment, and seeing that Ling Han didn't respond, he couldn't help but get annoyed, and said, "Why don't you ask me why I didn't come back here?" Ling Han gave an "oh" and said, "If you're willing to tell me, you naturally don't need me to ask. If very unwilling to tell me, it'll all make vous sad if I ask. So it's better not to ask." Damn, why did this kid not look like a 20-year-old young man at all? Niu Huaqing sighed and said, "Back then, I was also a figure who stirred up a storm in the imperial capital, and was hailed as a prodigy of formations. I succeeded Dao with formations, and although I was only in the extreme bone tier, I could fight with an inscription tier. It's also because of this that I was very proud when I was young and looked down on everything." Ling Han interjected, "You're the same now." The corner of Niu Huaqing's mouth twitched. He had the urge to hit someone, but he suppressed it. "Later, I fell in love with a woman and started to pursue her. However, there was another person who competed with me at that time." He closed his eyes as if he was recalling something. After a while he said, "In the end, I agreed to fight with that person. The loser would automatically withdraw. In the end, I lost." Didn't you say that you had attained Dao with formations, and even fight inscription tier cultivators?" Ling Han painfully revealed his scars. Niu Huaqing sighed and said, "That guy is abnormal. His physique is shocking, and he's naturally able to restrain me." Ling Han's heart stirred, and he asked, "General Vajra? In terms of the strongest physique, and one that was at the level of inscription tier, only General Vajra was matched that description." Niu Huaqing glanced at Ling Han, then nodded and said, "It's that bastard. I don't know how he cultivated, but his body is tougher than iron. No matter how I cast my techniques, he just charged over without any regard for anything, without any skill at all." At this point, he seemed indignant. In his opinion, General Vajra's method of breaking the formation was incomparably rude and shameless. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Formation masters were indeed afraid of this kind of high defense, and could only trap them. If they couldn't trap them, then they could only watch as the other party crushed them flat. In this battle, not only did I lose, I was also heavily injured, leaving behind wounds that will never heal, Niu Huaqing continued. So, my current battle prowess is only at the blood transformation tier, and my spiritual power has severely shrunk. Even activating middle-level formations, my spiritual power is just barely enough. I see. Ling Han nodded. Otherwise, if this old man still had the strength of inscription tier, he wouldn't have escaped alone. I can't accept this. Niu Huaqing clenched his fists and said, "Could it be that you still want to snatch back the person you love?" Ling Han looked at Niu Huaqing with a shocked gaze. "How old are you? You should be at least 70 or 80 years old, or even in fact over 100 years old." Niu Huaqing glared at him and said, "I'm not willing to lose to that iron lump. How can it be that the grand formations can't do anything to a person who practices brute force?" Ling Han patted Niu Huaqing's shoulder and said with a smile, "Old Niu, I almost misunderstood you. You've already fucking misunderstood." Niu Huaqing was speechless. Talking to this kid really required good self-restraint. Otherwise, he would want to kill someone every minute. "Brat, I need you to do something," he said. "You're really not polite," Ling Han said with a smile. "Tell me, what is it? If it's within my capabilities, I'll try my best to help. I want you to participate in the formations competition at the beginning of the year and obtain first place. Use this opportunity to enter the Formations Association and become the strongest formations master. In the future, defeat that iron lump and clear the name of formations." Ling Han smiled and said, "Old geezer Niu, back then, even you couldn't defeat General Vajra, so what makes you think I can? Because I was alone back then. Now, with my wisdom, experience, and your talent, we will definitely win," Niu Huaqing said with certainty. Ling Han felt that this was not reliable, but he did not want to destroy the other party's confidence, because he firmly believed that his strength would one day surpass General Vajra. If his thoughts were known by others, they would definitely say that he was delusional. One had to know that although General Vajra wasn't the strongest in battle prowess among the inscription tier, he had never tasted defeat, because no one could break through his defense. However, Ling Han did not think so. If the General Vajra's defense was invincible, he would not have submitted to the current emperor. Therefore, there was no invincible defense. It was just a matter of whether the attack power was high enough. "Sure," Ling Han nodded. In any case, he was quite interested in formations. Niu Huaqing was a little excited. He rubbed his hands and said, "From today onwards, I'll give you special training. One day, you'll use the formations that I've researched to beat that iron lump until he kneels and begs for mercy." Ling Han couldn't bear to spoil his mood, so he nodded and said with a smile, "Do I have to become your disciple?" Niu Huaqing shook his head. "Kid, you're extremely freakish. Your future is limitless. I can only give you a few pointers on formations for the time being. There's no need to acknowledge me as your master, lest future generations say that I'm shameless." Ling Han merely smiled. He treated Niu Huaqing more as a form of respect for an old friend. Furthermore, in this world, whether it's martial arts, formations, or alchemy, they're just beginning. We've only glimpsed a tiny bit of the great Tao, so who is qualified to be a teacher? Niu Huaqing said with great emotion. Ling Han was astounded. He had not expected Niu Huaqing to have such an understanding. "Old geezer Niu, why do you think so?" Niu Huaqing thought for a moment and said, "When I was young, I once entered an ancient site, could be said to be magical. I clearly entered in a wilderness, but after crossing through a doorway, it was a vast ocean and a country of swamps. That's definitely not an illusion," he emphasized. "It's spatial technology. A door is equivalent to a wormhole. It's incomparably magical." His face was full of excitement. "With this kind of technology, even a formations grandmaster like me can't see through it at all. It can be seen that the world we have touched is only the tip of the iceberg." Ling Han was also somewhat interested and said, "General Vajra and the others have advanced into the inscription tier at least 60 to 70 years ago, right? And now we're only in the elementary level of a great era. Why haven't General Vajra and the others been able to advance any further?" This was very unreasonable. Those who could stand out now were definitely martial arts prodigies. Then why was their progress so slow at the elementary level? "Good question." Niu Huaqing nodded. revealing a look of admiration. I've also studied this question. About 90 years ago, Iron Lump and the others had already advanced into the inscription tier, but after all these years, they've at most reached 5 inscriptions. Why? According to my deduction, that is because of the environment of heaven and earth. Oh! Ling Han's eyes lit up. I'd like to hear the details. This matter started more than 120 years ago. Niu Hua cleared his throat. Before this time, there had never been a cultivator on the celestial sea planet. However, some cultivation techniques and even formations had already been passed down. Ling Han was astounded. There were cultivation techniques passed down, and there were formations that were universally known, but no one had mastered. Wasn't this strange? However, after that point in time, wild beasts began to evolve rapidly, and humans are actually the same, Niu Huaqing said solemnly. Therefore, I speculate that the environment of heaven and earth has changed. If you want to cultivate, you have to sense the power of heaven and earth, right? But in the past, if this didn't exist, how would you be able to sense and cultivate? It's the same for formations. If you want to borrow the power of heaven and earth, there's no power to borrow. The formation foundations are just a few broken rocks and iron rods. This explanation made a lot of sense. It was just like how in the Genesis world, if there were only cultivation techniques but no spiritual chi, how could one cultivate? Ling Han drew inferences and said, Old geezer, what you mean is that although we're still at the beginning of the myriad of Tao, because the changes in the environment of heaven and earth haven't caught up yet, the appearance of higher-level cultivators have been restricted, which also makes the number of high-level cultivators very small. That's right. Niu Huaqing nodded, his expression full of admiration. Talking to a smart person was indeed comfortable because 1 point was all it took, and Ling Han was even more able to draw inferences which made him even happier. Therefore, this is your chance to catch up quickly, the old geezer said. Iron Lump and the others can no longer enter. That would be equivalent to them staying where they are and waiting for you. Ling Han nodded, and then said with a smile, I'm afraid that when I reach their height, the environment of heaven and earth will still remain unchanged. That would be depressing. The path of martial arts was clearly still very long, but they were restricted by the environment of heaven and earth and could not advance. Just thinking about it made one's heart feel stifled. That won't happen. Niu Huaqing shook her head. Since heaven and earth have already been revived, this process cannot be stopped. Right now, it is only temporarily stagnant, just like the calm before the arrival of the storm. Once it starts again, it will definitely be incomparably violent. So now is the best time to catch up. Indeed, Ling Han agreed. At this time, if he couldn't catch up quickly, it would be just like when he had just entered the celestial realm. Any random person he picked out would be much stronger than him, and the time needed to reach the 9th heaven would be in the hundreds of millions of years. Therefore, every minute and second was extremely precious now. If one was not careful and fell behind, when the environment of heaven and earth changed again, a great era would come rolling over, and the people behind would be left behind. Right, how did you get in, old man? Ling Han was surprised. Entering the academy required a fingerprint scan. Niu Huaqing scoffed with a disdainful expression. This academy's formations were set up by me. Oh, no wonder. The old geezer could take a completely different path. The defensive formations would not be activated at all, and he could walk on the ground as if it was flat ground. Come, brat. This old man will teach you formations, Niu Huaqing said. Originally, he had not intended to personally teach Ling Han formations. Instead, he wanted Ling Han to stay in the Formations Association for a period of time and reach the middle level or even high level before he would personally guide him. However, who would have thought that Huju City would encounter such a calamity? There were many things that Ling Han had to focus on, but since Niu Huaqing was so excited, Ling Han didn't want to disappoint him. In any case, he was still learning something, so he would learn formations for a few days first. Niu Huaqing was a prodigy in formations, but being a prodigy didn't mean that he was a qualified teacher. He didn't care if Ling Han understood or not, and just told him his understanding of formations, letting Ling Han remember it in his heart, and then practice it. If there was anything he didn't understand, he would ask him again. How many years had he stayed in the Divine Stone? Which one, martial arts, alchemy, and formations, was he not proficient in? Therefore, all he needed was to absorb knowledge. After the door had been opened to him, he would be able to grow quickly, and shockingly quickly. Niu Huaqing imparted all the formations knowledge he knew to Ling Han, and Ling Han also absorbed it completely. His ability to digest knowledge was astonishingly strong. This made Niu Huaqing very happy. As a master, he liked disciples like this the most. However, he only imparted experience and understanding, and did not teach Ling Han the specifics of formations. As long as he grasped the basic knowledge thoroughly, setting up any formations would be a piece of cake. Niu Huaqing only planned to teach Ling Han a set of formations, which would be used to defeat the General Vajra. However, this set of formations had yet to be fully formed. Niu Huaqing had obtained inspiration from a broken ancient formation and modified it, calling it the 33-layered Vajra formation. This was actually a pressure formation. It could suppress people up to 33 times, and one fold of pressure was equivalent to the full strength attack of an inscription tier elite. With 33 layers overlapping, it was indeed terrifying. Back then, that iron lump could withstand the bombardment of 10 times the level of inscription tier. After so many years, I'm afraid his resistance has improved. Therefore, I've also prepared 33 bombardments for him. It can definitely crush his tortoise shell and make him beg for mercy, Niu Huaqing said confidently. Ling Han had learned this formation, but he was temporarily unable to set it up. Firstly, there were no suitable materials to create the formation foundations. Secondly, his spiritual power had not reached the point where he could draw extremely effective formation patterns. Thirdly, even if he had the finished product, the strength of his spiritual power was not enough to activate it. Moreover, Niu Huaqing hadn't fully researched this formation yet. Why did he pass it on to Ling Han so early? Actually, he wanted to discuss it with Ling Han. Niu Huaqing was quite confident in Ling Han's comprehension ability. However, Ling Han did not spend much effort on this. His current focus was to increase his cultivation level. To fight the General Vajra, that would have to wait until he advanced into the extreme bone tier, right? Therefore, there was no hurry. Niu Huaqing also knew this, so he didn't rush him, and only told Ling Han to practice diligently, and not to forget to participate in the competition of the Formation Association after the new year. Old geezer, that is a grand occasion in the world of formations. How can an outsider like me participate? Ling Han ridiculed. Of course, you can participate once you certify yourself as an elementary-level formation master, right? Niu Huaqing immediately retorted. Ling Han sighed. He actually didn't really want to go, because with the invisible halo of hatred on his head, he reckoned that going to the Formations Association would definitely cause trouble again. It was annoying to keep doing this. Niu Huaqing didn't give Ling Han too much pressure. He quickly left the academy. Ling Han wondered if he was going to seek out his old lover to reminisce about the past. Ling Han once again placed his focus on alchemy. This was currently his most profitable avenue, and whether it was cultivating mystical power, body arts, or formations, they all required a large amount of money as support. He mainly concocted blood-replenishing pills and qi return pills. These were the alchemical pills that blood transformation tier cultivators used the most. In addition, he also concocted some 100 neutralization pills and berserk pills. The 100 neutralization pill could detoxify poisons, and the berserk pill could allow a second eruption. He was very interested in the berserk pill. If he could neutralize the side effects of the medicinal power, a blood transformation tier would erupt for more than 20 minutes. The problem of the consumption of mystical power was also very easy to solve. The solution was qi return pills, and there were no side effects. It was just that the amount of mystical power that was replenished with each pill was a little too little, especially for someone like Ling Han, whose mystical power was incomparably pure. He had to improve the pill recipe. The recovery effect was too lousy. Ling Han immediately immersed himself in it. Previously, he had been unable to do so because consuming the qi return pill in the meridian opening tier had no effect. This was completely different. He savored it carefully and searched for a large number of medicinal ingredients, trying to find substitutes to increase the effect of the alchemical pills. 3 days later, he had a direction and began to experiment. The medicinal ingredients were very expensive. Fortunately, he had some savings to begin with. In addition, Hu Yang had lost 5 million to him, so he did not have to worry about money for the time being. On the other side, Huan Shui had also reached the peak of the 12 meridians. Ling Han gave her a month's time to sense a hidden meridian. If she could succeed, then she would continue to break through to reach 20 meridians. If she couldn't, then there was no need to waste time. She would directly break through to the blood transformation tier. Another 4 days passed. After experiencing many failures, Ling Han finally succeeded in improving the Qi return pill, and its effects increased more than tenfold. Now, I basically don't have to worry about running out of power. Ling Han stored the alchemical pill into the essence nurturing gourd. For the time being, he had no intention of selling the improved version of the Qi return pill. He had to satisfy his own needs first. He still wanted to improve the berserk pill, but before he could start, he was visited by an esteemed guest. Shenyuan Dingua. This was General Xuanyuan's 17th son. He was only 25 years old this year, and was already standing at the peak stage of the blood transformation tier. He could advance into the extreme bone tier at any time. Why didn't he break through? He was still waiting for the son of the 7th son of the Shenyuan clan to enter the academy and take over his position to continue leading the Shenyuan gang. Ling Han was very surprised. This General Shenyuan was really good at having children. He should be more than 100 years old now, which meant that Shenyuan Dingua had been born when he was at least in his 80s. Thinking about it, it made sense. Due to the environment of heaven and earth, General Xuanyuan's cultivation couldn't advance even an inch now. What could he do when he was extremely bored? Thus, even if Shenyuan Dingua suddenly had a younger brother at this time, Ling Han wouldn't find it strange. After all, an inscription tier should have around 200 years of lifespan, and General Shenyuan was currently in his prime. Brother Shenyuan. Ling Han cupped his hands in salute. This time, Shenyuan Dingua came alone. He looked around the room, and couldn't help but be surprised. He asked, Ling Han, were you refining pills just now? That's right. Ling Han nodded. You know how to refine pills? Shenyuan Dingua asked in shock. You're already a fucking martial arts prodigy, and you're reputed to be the second Hong Tianbu. But now you can even refine pills. How are others supposed to live? However, it seemed that Hong Tianbu also had a side job. It was said that he also had shocking natural talent in formations. Was this what a freakish genius was like? Ling Han thought for a moment and pretended to enter the bedroom. In reality, he took out a Qi return pill from the essence nurturing gourd, then handed it over to Shenyuan Dingua and said, This is the Qi return pill I refined. Shenyuan Dingua didn't pay much attention to it at first. After all, he had seen Qi return pills before. However, he soon revealed a surprised expression and said, This Qi return pill seems a bit different. It was different from what he had seen and consumed. Ling Han smiled and said, You can try eating it. Shenyuan Dingua hesitated for a moment before popping the pill into his mouth. He wasn't afraid that Ling Han would harm him. If he did, this guy was really courting death. In an instant, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on his face, and he asked, Ling Han, how did the effects of this Qi return pill reach 10 times greater? He looked at Ling Han as if he was looking at a monster. Ling Han nodded and said, To be precise, it's an increase of 11 times the effect. Shenyuan Dingua felt his scalp go numb. What kind of concept was that? The mystical power of a cultivator was stored in the meridians, and the meridians were only so wide. The amount that could be stored was naturally limited. Once it was used up, it would be gone. Therefore, as cultivators fought, they would encounter an awkward problem. Their power would suddenly completely disappear, and an absolutely advantageous position could have the tables instantly turned. It was very normal for them to lose and die. At this time, the Qi return pill would be of great use. It was equivalent to extending one's life. Although there was no limit to the number of Qi return pills one could consume, there was a problem with the conversion rate. If one ate 1 or 10 at the same time, the amount that could really be converted into mystical power was basically the same. Therefore, if this chi return pill with an increased effect of 11 times was taken out, it would be fought over by blood transformation tier elites. Ling Han, do you still have such chi return pills? Shenyuan Dingwa hurriedly asked. He could smell the immense value of these pills. Ling Han nodded and said, there are still a few left. Can you sell them to me? Shenyuan Dingwa asked expectantly. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, I'm not selling, but we can work together to do business. How? Shenyuan Dingwa asked. I have 10 improved chi return pills here. Take them and auction them. At the same time, hire alchemists to refine the improved version of the chi return pill. After they become popular overnight, do something like sell only a limited number, Ling Han said with a smile. Shenyuan Dingwa was taken aback. You mean you'll offer the pill recipe? This was even more shocking than the fact that Ling Han possessed an improved version of the chi return pill. This was a pill recipe. Who wouldn't hide it? As a unique ultimate knowledge, who would offer it out for others to learn? However, Ling Han did not care at all. The Great Tao had just begun to rise, and the chi return pill was only worth some money for now. In the future, no one would be interested in it, and it would be of little value. Therefore, he naturally had to seize the opportunity to make a fortune. Other than the chi return pill, there were also the mystical power pill and the meridian exploration pill. They had all been improved by him. He had originally given them to Mo Guahao, but Mo Guahao had died in Huju City. You're really willing? Shenyuan Dingwa's eyes lit up. To him, selling an improved version of the chi return pill from his own hands was not only a matter of earning money, but it would also give him additional points from General Shenyuan and even in fact gain the favor of the Holy Emperor, His Majesty. The significance of this was completely different. Ling Han nodded and said, if I was not willing, then why should I tell you so much? Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Good. Shenyuan Dingwa was overjoyed. He had personally come to see Ling Han only to express his appreciation of Ling Han. He had not expected to receive such an unexpected reward. Then how should we split the profits? He looked at Ling Han. Ling Han had the upper hand in this matter. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, not only do I provide the alchemy method for the chi return pill, but I also provide the same for the mystical power pill and the meridian exploration pill. They are all improved versions, and you can let someone test their effects. In terms of profits, how about 50/50ths? He only offered 3 pill recipes but took half of the profits. This ratio was not low. Shenyuan Dingwa thought for a moment and nodded. Okay. If this was another person or another business, wasn't it a joke if he wanted to take 50% of the profits without any effort on his part? However, this was different. In addition to making money, it also had a greater political significance. Therefore, Shenyuan Dingwa was willing to do it even if he didn't earn a single cent. Moreover, the improved version of the chi return pill could definitely dominate the pill market. Could also be sold for several times the price. Even 10% of the net profit was extremely impressive. At that thought, Shenyuan Dingwa's slight dissatisfaction disappeared. Earning money, fame, and prestige were simply gold ingots that had fallen right into his lap from the skies. Ling Han directly handed over the 3 pill recipes to Shenyuan Dingwa. It was his principle to use people without suspicion. Shenyuan Dingwa naturally thought more highly of Ling Han. This young man really knew how to behave. Such trust made him a little excited, and he wanted to completely trust Ling Han and vice versa. Ling Han, there's a place I don't know if you're interested in going, he suddenly said, deciding to return the favor. Oh, what place? Ling Han asked, his expression a little strange. This fellow wouldn't want to invite him to a brothel to celebrate, right? A catacomb. I found it not long ago, said Shenyuan Dingwa. A historical site of the previous civilization? Ling Han asked. I don't think so. Shenyuan Dingwa shook his head. There are 3 levels in the catacombs, and a large number of purple wasps live there. Purple wasps. Ling Han had never heard of them. Shenyuan Dingwa smiled and said, purple wasps are a type of demonic beast. At most, they are at the blood transformation tier, but because they live in groups, their numbers are huge. If they attack in groups, not to mention an extreme bone tier, Even an inscription tier would have a headache. However, the honey brewed by the purple wasps is an incomparably precious body-tempering material. Xianxia continued, "We once sent a mini drone into the catacombs to investigate the situation. There's a lot of honey inside. Moreover, there's a vermilion fruit on the 3rd level of the catacombs. According to our speculation, it's at least 1,000 years old." Ling Han was delighted. The vermilion fruit was also a godly medicine that strengthened one's life and vitality. If he wanted to break through to the second change, then the vermilion fruit would be a timely help. "What was the result?" he asked. Xianxia nodded. "When you reach the second change in the future, the 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit will be of great use." "All right." Ling Han immediately agreed, and then asked, "When are we setting?" Xianxia couldn't help but smile. "Why are you more anxious than me?" He didn't keep him in suspense. "The tentative date is 10 days later. We need to be fully prepared." In that catacomb, there were millions of purple wasps, and they were at least in the meridian opening tier. There were also quite a number of blood transformation tier beings, and the poison of the bees was fatal. Thus, it would probably be bad even if it was an inscription tier elite that rashly entered. However, the General Vidra guarded the border. How could he set everything aside to get some honey? Thus, when a few blood transformation tier elites entered the catacombs, they had to be fully prepared, or else they might lose their lives. Ling Han was not afraid. He had the essence nurturing gourd. Worst come to worst, he could hide inside. He believed that, with the purple wasp's intelligence, they would not be able to discover the secret of the essence nurturing gourd. Of course, he would not reveal the secret of the essence nurturing gourd. Just the spatial attribute alone made it incomparably precious, not to mention that it could nurture divine sense. Let's wait. Taking advantage of these few days of time, Ling Han actively refined medicinal pills. These were all not for sale, and he would only use them for himself. He calculated the time. There was still a month before the test. Then, when he returned from the catacombs, he would go and certify himself as a formations master. It would be just right in time for him to participate in the formations competition after the new year. In just 7 days, the improved Qi return pills began to be auctioned. Ordinary Qi return pills were sold for 10,000 Dark North coins each, which was already very expensive. After all, they were consumables. However, the improved version of the Qi return pill could be sold for at most 230,000 and at least 200,000. After Ling Han learned of this, he smiled slightly. He could happily earn money again. The reason why the improved Qi return pills could be sold at such a high price was because there were few of them. However, after mass production, the price would definitely decrease, but he believed that it would not be difficult to sell them for 100,000. The key was how much the cost of the ingredients were. As for the ingredients, it was about 17,000 Dark North coins per furnace, and the finished product was 3 to 4 pills. In theory, the cost of one pill was about 5,000. But considering that only Ling Han could achieve a 100% success rate, the cost would definitely rise. According to a 50% success rate, the cost of ingredients would be 10,000, and the manpower would be counted as another 10,000. Then, the net profit would be 80,000, and Ling Han would get 40,000 even if he only took half of it. Most importantly, Ling Han didn't need to lift a finger. He could earn 40,000 for each pill sold, so he was naturally very pleased. Moreover, there were also the improved versions of the Mystical Power Pill and the Meridian Exploration Pill. Although the price of each pill was lower, the demand was greater. He believed that the benefits would not be small. This was only the beginning. He could still improve more pill recipes in the future. Alright, there was no need to think about money for now. The problem now was spending money. He was looking for the remaining 7 main ingredients to concoct the antidote for the soul-departing pill. He already had an idea. As expected of the capital, as long as one had money, there was nothing that could not be bought. 3 days later, Xianxia came to find him. They could set off now. Ling Han asked Lian Shuerong to take care of Huan Shui for him while he set off alone. After thinking for a moment, he decided not to bring that little lecherous pig along. Although bringing this little lecherous pig along would increase his safety, it would also increase the factor of instability. Forget it, let it continue to harm the female students of the academy and take advantage of them. Ling Han and Shenyuan Dingwa first arrived at the entrance of the academy to meet up with the others for this operation. After a while, a burly young man arrived. He looked to be about 24 or 25 years old. "Come, let me introduce you," Shenyuan Dingwa said. "This is General Vajra's 7th grandson, Qin Xingho." Ling Han nodded and said, "Brother Qin." No wonder his physique was astonishing. As the descendant of the General Vajra, he was definitely good at body refinement. Qin Xingho wasn't dissatisfied. Although Ling Han didn't have much status, his potential was too great. He was known as the second Hong Tianbu, and his future achievements were limitless. Thus, it was normal for him to be arrogant. He also nodded at Ling Han and did not say anything else. Ling Han knew that Shenyuan Dingwa must have paid a price to get him a place on the group for this exploration into the catacombs. Otherwise, who would be able to bring more people without permission? He looked at Shenyuan Dingwa, who smiled at him. "Don't make eyes at me, the two of you. If you want to be gay, hurry up and get a room," Qin Xingho said with a smile. "That mouth of yours." Shenyuan Dingwa shook his head. Logically speaking, Qin Xingho and Shenyuan Dingwa should be from two different generations, but the two of them didn't seem to care about seniority. After a while, another person came. However, this was a charming woman. Shenyuan Dingwa immediately leaned close to Ling Han's ear and said, "This is the granddaughter of General Moon Eclipse, Yin Xiujing." Ling Han nodded to himself. General Moon Eclipse was the only female among the 4 great generals, and she also had the fewest offspring. After all, it was impossible for her to have children just out of boredom. However, although she only had one son, this son had countless wives and concubines. He had given her many grandchildren, and this Yin Xiujing was one of the most outstanding ones. "Try not to talk to her. This poisonous rose likes to seduce people and then step on them," Shenyuan Dingwa added. "What, are you making things up about me?" Yin Xiujing walked over with a twist of her slender waist. Her figure was very hot, and the parts that should be slender were slender. Her small waist really could only be held in one hand, completely like the body of a snake. However, she still had a peach-like butt. Every sway of her butt was seductive. Shenyuan Dingwa and Qin Xingho both deliberately turned their heads away. This was called out of sight, out of mind. Only Ling Han remained calm and composed with a faint smile on his face, and his gaze was neither avoiding nor evasive. Yin Xiujing's beautiful eyes couldn't help but light up. Shenyuan Dingwa and Qin Xingho could be considered old friends of hers. They had known about her personality for a long time, so she hadn't been able to toy with the two of them. She was just worrying about how boring this trip would be, and now there was a newcomer? Now, she did not have to worry about the long journey and having nothing to while away the time. "Yo, so this is Ling Han?" she said with a smile, revealing a set of snow-white teeth, exuding a bewitching allure. She was a natural vixen. In the face of such flirtatiousness, 9 out of 10 men would definitely not be able to control themselves. However, Ling Han was used to seeing all kinds of beauties. Some were as cold as ice, some were as passionate as fire, and some were as cold as ice on the surface, but as passionate as fire when they were aroused. How could he possibly lose his composure in front of Yin Xiujing? "Senior sister Yin," he said with a smile. "Oh, why are you treating me like an outsider? Call me big sister," Yin Xiujing said coquettishly, her voice filled with temptation. Shenyuan Dingwa and Qin Xingho looked at each other and thought to themselves, "Here she comes. She's going to cause trouble again." However, they didn't want to draw fire onto themselves, so they naturally didn't have any intention of interrupting. In any case, Yin Xiujing knew her limits. At most, she would make people burn with desire, but they couldn't vent it. She wouldn't play until the other party was dead or crippled. Ling Han merely smiled. What a joke. He was an old monster who had lived in the Genesis world for more than an epoch. How could he call such a little girl in her 20s big sister? Even if the flow of time was different, it was still impossible. The more Ling Han resisted, the more interested Yin Xiujing became. This was because after conquering Ling Han, who was like this, she would also feel a greater sense of accomplishment. He. Looks like I'm the last one. Another young man appeared. He carried a thick and solid bag on his back. Tang Yu, you didn't manage to borrow a spatial spirit tool? Qin Xingho asked. Tang Yu shook his head. Don't remind me. If my father refuses to lend me the spatial spirit tool, can I still snatch it? Ling Han took a look. Shenyuan Dingua, Qin Xingho, and Yin Xiujing didn't bring any luggage. From the looks of it, they had probably borrowed a spatial spirit tool. Otherwise, even with their statuses, it would be impossible for them to obtain such a treasure. With such a comparison, it could be seen how lucky he was. All right, let's set off, Shenyuan Dingua said, also helping Ling Han out of his predicament. Because Yin Xiujing was about to use all her tactics on him, the 5 of them set off. 4 of them were descendants of the 4 great generals, and no other person was qualified to be companions with them. They still attached great importance to this operation. They didn't even bring along their trusted aides because they didn't want to share any of their gains. In addition, it was their abilities. If they weren't strong enough, they would only be a burden. One had to know that the number of purple wasps in the cave was in the millions. Comparing their numbers with that number? Haha. From this, it could be seen that Shenyuan Dingua had definitely paid a considerable price to bring Ling Han along, sacrificing a portion of the benefits that he was due. Ling Han nodded to himself. Shenyuan Dingua was a person who knew when to advance and when to retreat. He was worth making friends with. Amongst Ling Han's group, there were 4 people with extremely high statuses. Even if they were only one of the many descendants of the 4 great generals, obtaining a small warship was a sure thing for them. The warships were fundamentally different from the flying machines of the technological civilization. They were driven by formations and consumed jade seeds as energy, unlike the flying machines that used various scientific principles. Undoubtedly, warships were more suitable for this environment. This was because the magnetic fields in various parts of the world were very chaotic now. It was very easy for the instruments of the aircraft to malfunction, causing a plane crash. However, even in the imperial capital, there were only a few warships and they were strictly controlled. If it weren't for the fact that Shenyuan Dingua and the others were powerful enough, it would be impossible for them to borrow a warship. This warship wasn't very big, and was of the same model as the one that Ling Han had used to come to the imperial capital. However, there were only 5 of them, so they didn't have to worry about not having enough rooms. The cave was still quite far from the imperial capital. Even though there was a warship to traverse the vast lakes and mountains, it still took them 7 days to finally reach the place. On the way, they used their optical computers to watch the video captured by the drone that had entered the cave previously. They had a rough understanding of the place. To Ling Han, this kind of exploration had already been experienced countless times. Very quickly, he pieced together the entirety of the cave in his mind. He believed that even if he closed his eyes, he would still be able to walk from start to finish, and would definitely not bump into a wall. The only thing he had lost was power. The warship stopped, and they disembarked. The warship would wait for them here, and they would have to complete the rest of the journey on their own. The warship could not drive over. Along the way, Yin Xiujing flirted with Ling Han in all sorts of ways. She would even enter his room at night and put on an alluring posture. However, Ling Han was always polite and extremely well-mannered, and did not lose his composure in the slightest, causing Yin Xiujing to be extremely depressed. If this continued, she would really have to take off her clothes. How was that possible? She only liked to play, but she wasn't prepared to sacrifice her body or her looks. She seriously suspected that Ling Han's sexual orientation was abnormal. Otherwise, why would he be so cold? After confirming this, her sense of failure immediately dissipated. The 5 of them walked through the mountains. There was no road here at all, because there had never been any signs of human habitation. It was all dense trees and weeds, and the rocks were rugged. If not for the fact that they all had the strength of blood transformation tier, just this last stretch of the journey alone would have sent them back where they came. The biggest problem this brought them was their speed. It took them half a day to travel about 50 kilometers before they finally arrived at their destination. In front of them, a sinister cave appeared. "Is everyone ready?" Qin Xingho asked with a serious expression. "Yes." The other 4 nodded. They all had a bottle of oil in their hands. This was specially made for purple wasps. After applying it on their bodies, they would not feel anything when they smelled it. However, purple wasps hated this smell the most. They would be able to smell it from afar and fly off long before they reached them. Let's go. After rubbing themselves with oil, they entered the cave. Because they had already seen the video, the 5 of them knew the situation inside very well. Even though it quickly turned pitch black, no one panicked. As expected, this kind of oil was very useful. They didn't encounter a single purple wasp along the way. It was as if such demonic beasts didn't exist here. However, they did not dare to be careless and turn on the optical computer's lighting function. This was very likely to make the purple wasps go crazy and attack brazenly. This was because they were getting closer and closer to the place where the honey was stored. To the purple wasps, it was their food. Birds die for food, so the purple wasps would definitely fight them to the death. The first floor of the cave was not big, so they quickly reached the end. The 5 of them took out their night vision goggles and put them on. They saw that there were discs on the cave wall in front of them, and the discs were covered in shiny sticky liquid, looking as if they were about to drip. "Get ready," Xianxia said in a low voice. 1, 2, 3. The 5 of them jumped out at the same time and removed the discs one by one. Wang, there were purple wasps among the discs. They flew out after being alarmed and immediately attacked the 5 of them. However, the 5 of them decisively attacked and directly killed these demon bees without making any sound. In just 3 to 4 minutes, they had plucked the discs clean. All of this was honey. During this time, more demon bees returned, but they were all killed. "Let's go. We're not far from the beehive rioting." The 5 of them quickly turned around. Each of them carried 20 to 30 discs on their backs, their speed astonishing. After another 10 minutes, they had already run out of the cave. The 5 of them looked at each other and were pleasantly surprised. This trip was surprisingly smooth. Wang, wang, wang. A disturbing sound came from the cave. "Oh no! The hive has been alerted. Let's go." The 5 of them hurriedly ran back the way they came. In just a few steps, they saw a yellowish-purple cloud fly out of the cave. In an instant, it covered the sky and earth, circling around the mountains. That was the purple wasps. Because there were too many of them, they all formed into what looked like a cloud. Fortunately, these demon bees did not discover Linghan and the others. After circling around the mountains for a while, they could only helplessly return. When night fell, they returned to the warship. According to Xianxia and the other 3, they were going to return now. This was because even if they still had some specially refined oil, how could these demon bees not be on guard after their homes were raided? Demonic beasts had developed intelligence, and there were even existences in the blood transformation tier, so their intelligence was definitely not low. Therefore, it was enough to harvest it once, and they should not be greedy. "I want to go back again," Linghan said. "Linghan, don't think that you can go a second or third time just because our first time went so smoothly," Tang Yu said seriously. He was only saying this because of Xianxia. Otherwise, who cared if he lived or died? Linghan smiled and said, "My goal isn't honey, but the vermilion fruit in the 3rd level of the cave." "That's right, you're only at the first change. You need this treasured fruit to increase your blood and qi." Qin Xingho nodded. "I think it's still too dangerous." Tang Yu shook his head. "It's fine, I'll be careful," Linghan said with a smile. "For this, I've made full preparations. Let's meet again in the imperial capital then." He insisted, and the 4 of them could not do anything about his decision. They decided to wait for him for 5 days. 5 days later, they would start the warship and return to the capital. Linghan agreed and left alone. Xianxia and the other 3 didn't give him a share of the honey or even mention it. That was understandable. If they gave it to him and he died in the beehive, wouldn't that be a huge waste? Treasures that could be used to cultivate one's physique were too precious and could not be bought even if one had money. It was no wonder that the 4 of them were stingy. Linghan did not take it to heart, because he had never intended to take advantage of the 4 of them in the first place, and had not contributed much. What right did he have to share the gains? He could just go get it himself. "Little brother Han, you have to come back safely," Biz's sister hasn't succeeded yet, Yin Xiujing said delicately on the warship after Ling Han had taken a few steps. Ling Han almost fell over. Fuck, this woman was too unreserved. Ling Han did not leave at night, because he needed to get enough rest and prepare for the next day. He entered the essence nurturing gourd, and he would sleep in it every night. He would accumulate energy for the entire day and use it at night. In the wilderness, this was safer. He could rest well and completely relax. A night passed, and Ling Han left the essence nurturing gourd. He felt that all his bodily functions had improved to a certain extent. His mystical power, physical power, and divine sense, especially his divine sense, had improved the most. When the sun rose, he sat cross-legged on the ground and channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique, absorbing the power of heaven and earth to strengthen himself. When he finished, he was surprised to find that he had absorbed a trace of purple energy. He was stunned. In the legends, there was a saying that purple chi came from the east, and purple chi was a noble symbol. He actually extracted a trace of purple chi. When the purple chi entered his body, the mystical power in his entire body boiled for a moment. Then, the evolution of his level of being accelerated. Although this was still insignificant compared to the entire process of the first change, it was a shocking change compared to before. If he could continuously absorb purple chi to cultivate, he believed that his advancement speed would increase by at least 10 times, or even 100 times. Unfortunately, there was only a small amount of purple chi. Ling Han found it strange. How did he extract it? Was it because he had cultivated to this level and could naturally absorb higher-level energy? Or was it because the heaven and earth environment here was special? He would cultivate and see again tomorrow. He cleaned up, ate something, and set off at once. At 3 or 4 in the afternoon, he came to the cave again. He oiled himself and entered. However, this time the oil was useless. On the contrary, it immediately attracted a large number of purple wasps. Each of them was the size of a fist. Their bodies were yellow, and their wings were purple. As they formed a group, they emitted a buzzing sound. It was extremely noisy. Ling Han wanted to test the strength of these demon bees. Under the channeling of his mystical power, a shield of mystical power formed on the surface of his body. The broken sword had already emerged from the gourd, and with a single slash, a terrifying sword chi instantly swept out. Pu, piu, piu. The sword chi swept past, and a large number of demonic bees were immediately severed in half by him, falling to the ground. However, more demon bees passed through the sword chi and stabbed at him with their stingers. Ling Han's left hand clenched into a fist and punched out. Boom! A terrifying power surged, and many more demon bees were shattered by him. How could close to 1.5 million kilograms of strength be a joke? Wang, wang, wang. Light rippled on Ling Han's body. That was formed when the demonic bees stabbed into the mystical power shield. A meridian opening tier bee sting naturally could not pierce through Ling Han's mystical power shield, but there were simply too many of them. Wang, wang, wang. It was as if countless raindrops had fallen onto his body, splashing everywhere. The mystical power shield only lasted for a breath's time before shattering. Instantly, hundreds of sharp spikes stabbed him at the same time, but Ling Han's skin was incomparably tough, and they could not pierce through at all. This was awkward. In that instant, who knew how many demonic bees broke their stingers? Yet they were unable to inject any poison into Ling Han's body. Ling Han laughed loudly and shook his body. Instantly, many demon bees fell from his body. However, the bees immediately launched a second wave of attacks, targeting his eyes, ears, and nostrils. Damn, they were really experienced. He was done playing. With a thought, Ling Han had already entered into the essence nurturing gourd. Unfortunately, this wasn't the Black Tower, and there was still a small green gourd on the ground. Otherwise, if it disappeared without a trace, then that would be a perfect concealment. Fortunately, although the purple wasps had developed intelligence, they were at most equivalent to 4- or 5-year-old children. When they suddenly lost track of Ling Han, they were instantly at a loss. They flew in circles in the sky before scattering in all directions. Ling Han sighed and changed into a new set of clothes first. Now, the oil had turned into a bee-attracting talisman. He waited for a while, then came out of the gourd and walked quietly. However, these demon bees were very sensitive to scents, and very quickly discovered Ling Han again. First, there were 1 or 2, then a dozen, and finally they formed groups. Ling Han hurriedly broke into a run. His speed was extremely fast, and even the winged demonic bees could not catch up to him. This was still because the terrain in the cave was too complicated. A stone pillar would appear in front of him suddenly here and there. Otherwise, if they were in the plains, how could they catch up to Ling Han when he used shuttle steps and exploded at twice the speed of sound? They had reached the end of the first level, but there was no value here anymore. All the honey had been taken away. Ling Han advanced without hesitation and entered the second level. However, even more demon bees attacked from the front. Ling Han simply covered his ears, closed his eyes, and lowered his head. He now protected the weakest parts of his body. Sting me if you can. However, he immediately bared his teeth because a few demonic bees had actually attacked his anus, and there were even a few that wanted to attack his cock. Fuck, you're not hyenas. How did you learn how to do it? Ling Han hurriedly entered into the essence nurturing gourd. He didn't want his anus to be disfigured. Although his cock was of no use for him now, when the Empress and the others came out and discovered that it had changed shape, wouldn't they laugh at him? If he had known earlier, he would have brought the little pink pig with him. It should be very useful to protect his anus. This time, the bees were much more patient. They flew around the surroundings and refused to leave. However, their intelligence was not high enough. After guarding for a long time, they left again. Ling Han became even more careful. Fuck, these demonic bees even knew to aim for his cock. With the current strength of his body art, it was not strong enough for him to ignore their attacks completely. After leaving the gourd, he advanced again. Carefully, he reached the end of the second level. Because the honey on the first level had been stolen and they knew that outsiders had broken in, the defense here was very tight. There were at least a few thousand demon bees guarding it. Since he couldn't steal it, he would snatch it by force. Ling Han charged over and directly snatched a piece of honey, stuffing it into the essence nurturing gourd. In terms of individual battle prowess, not a single demon bee was a match for him, and if they attacked together with his physique, he didn't need to be too afraid. He only needed to protect the few parts of his body that were weaker. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces. He gained more and more, but in the end, he did not collect all of them. After taking half of them, he went to the third level and hid in the spatial gourd. If all the honey was taken away, the bees would most likely starve to death and disappear completely. Then Ling Han could only come and harvest them once, but if he let them continue to grow, he could come and take them a second time or a third time. Naturally, this would be even more worth it. After entering the third level, Ling Han quickly hid in the essence nurturing gourd again, and happily looked at his gains. The second time, the honey was not only more, but also of higher quality. Although Ling Han had not obtained any honey before, he had tasted it once. Compared to this, the difference was very obvious. Great, it was a huge profit. Ling Han did not leave the gourd again, and began to eat honey inside. It was sweet and fragrant, and the taste was really extremely good. After a while, he felt his entire body burning, as if he had drunk strong wine. His entire body was warm, and he felt indescribably comfortable. He could feel the strengthening of his cells. Not only were the cell walls tougher, but the cells themselves were also growing in size. Ling Han had a kind of enlightenment. Body arts improved the cells, while mystical power was used on the level of being. Theoretically speaking, it was definitely mystical power that was more important. It was just like how an ant would develop intelligence after cultivating mystical power. In the end, it would become a human, and it wouldn't be strange even if it actually surpassed humans. And in the case of body art, it could only help this ant become stronger, but could not help it cast off its essence of being an ant. However, these two did not oppose each other, but rather complemented each other. Advancing into a new level of being could open the upper limit of the physique, and the toughness of the physique could also safeguard the advancement of the level of being. Both were equally important. Ling Han thought internally. At present, the mainstream was cultivating mystical power, and this was not advisable. However, there was nothing that could be done. At present, there was absolutely not enough resources to support the cultivation of body arts, and there was also no powerful body arts technique either. This would mean half the effects with twice the work, and waste a lot of resources. Otherwise, why would Xianxia and the others take such a risk? They didn't lack the resources to cultivate mystical power. From this, it could be seen just how lucky General Vajra was to have obtained a massive crimson cloud stone. Ling Han swept his gaze over the nearly 90 pieces of honey around him. Each piece was as large as a cattail leaf fan, and though the amount was slightly lesser than the first time, this was an amount that Ling Han had monopolized. Furthermore, the quality was even higher. Thus, the gains this time definitely surpassed the total of the first harvest. Ling Han broke into a grin. There was still the third level, and he was sure that there would be more and higher quality honey there. After obtaining so much honey, he was sure that it would be enough to complete his body arts at the blood transformation tier. That night, Ling Han slept very soundly, and his strength increased very quickly. This came from the aspect of body art. The next morning, Ling Han exited the gourd and started to cultivate. This half an hour was the most precious time for cultivators to cultivate, but at the same time it was also the least valuable. Anyone could use the power of heaven and earth, wherever they were, and there was no difference in wealth or poverty. The heavens were heartless, and were incredibly fair. After he finished cultivating, he was also discovered by a few patrolling demonic bees, and began another mad dash. The strength of the demonic bees on the third level was much stronger, and there was no shortage of blood transformation tier elites. Their speed was extremely fast, and they even caught up to Ling Han, launching attacks at him repeatedly. So Ling Han had no choice but to frequently enter into the essence nurturing gourd. Could not be helped. This place was too dark, and the terrain was too complicated. Ling Han could not unleash any real speed at all, and these demonic bees were born and grew here, so they naturally had long since adapted. Even in this place, they could still unleash the maximum speed. Moreover, the intelligence of blood transformation tier beasts was considerably higher. After Ling Han dodged a few times, these demonic bees circled around the gourd, unwilling to leave. They were determined to drag things out with Ling Han to the end. Ling Han waited for half a day, but not a single bee left. Instead, their numbers increased. He couldn't go on like this. Ling Han gritted his teeth and came out of the gourd. With a wave of his hand, he shot out a weapon-nurturing leaf. Instantly, a brilliance flickered, and the leaf turned into a divine saber that slashed down madly. This was a 3-pattern tree leaf, which was enough to unleash the might of extreme bone tier. The talisman weapon didn't have any vital points. It would be the only one attacking. The more bees gathered, the more unwilling they were to leave, and the more they were at a disadvantage. Furthermore, after Ling Han threw out the talisman weapon, he had already hidden into the essence nurturing gourd. These demonic bees didn't even have the chance to fight him madly even if they wanted to. When the weapon-nurturing leaf's power was completely expended, there was also a thick layer of demonic bee corpses piled up nearby, and only a few hundred managed to escape. Ling Han hurriedly began to journey again, feeling heartache. There were only 7 3-patterned weapon-nurturing leaves left. He had given 4 2-patterned leaves to Huan Shui. In any case, he had no use for them, so it was just right for Huan Shui to have them. There had to be great gains, or it would be too much of a waste. In fact, Xianxia and the others could also afford to squander the power of an extreme bone tier talisman weapon. However, there was one thing that they couldn't compare to Ling Han, and that was without the essence nurturing gourd. When the talisman weapon went on a killing spree, they would also be counterattacked by the demonic bees. In the end, it was highly possible that they would die together. Thus, this kind of method could only be used by Ling Han. He once again ran madly, and the demonic bees naturally attacked him again very quickly. However, Ling Han was not willing to throw another weapon-nurturing leaf. Instead, he tried his best to protect his vital points and flee madly. The cave on the third level was much larger, so Ling Han ran for a whole 3 hours before finally arriving at the end of the cave. Holy Mother! There was indeed a lot of honey hanging here, but there was also an astonishingly large number of demonic bees on guard. Each of them was the size of a human head, which meant that they were all blood transformation tier level. He had to throw away another weapon, Nurturing Leaf. Ling Han sighed. He was really being wasteful. However, if he didn't use it now, when should he use it then? However, these demonic bees were surprisingly calm and did not attack at the first instant. Strange. Ling Han was just thinking about this when he heard a buzzing and extremely noisy sound. At this time, there was naturally no need for him to hide his tracks. He turned on the light function of the optical computer and saw that from a corner of the cave, there were at least a few thousand demonic bees flying over with a colossal white creature on their backs. Good lord, its body was as long as 9 meters, and its round body looked like it was about to explode, and unlike ordinary queen bees, it actually had a lot of claws growing from its body. They were like sharp hooks, and its whole body was covered with sharp spikes, making one panic at the sight. An enemy had invaded from outside. Shouldn't they have immediately hidden the queen bee? Why had they brought her out instead? Realization immediately dawned on Ling Han. This meant that the swarm thought that his strength was not enough to threaten the existence of the queen bee. Wang, wang, wang. Thousands of demonic bees worked together to carry the queen bee over. Ling Han could clearly see that the queen bee had 2 massive compound eyes that were staring at him with a disdainful expression. This was an extreme bone-tier demonic beast. Ling Han immediately thought that terrifying aura could not be faked. It was no wonder then. An extreme bone-tier demonic beast didn't need to fear him. Ling Han's eyes swept around. He discovered that vermilion fruit. A demonic bee was flying over and plucking a bright red fruit. Then it flew in front of the queen bee and fed it. The queen bee only took a bite and didn't even need to chew, and this vermilion fruit was eaten by it whole. Then, with a put, it laid a series of eggs. The demonic bees behind it immediately began moving them and sent them to a place that was specially used to nurture the young bees. Ling Han really wanted to rush up and snatch the vermilion fruit from the queen bee's stomach. Such a precious treasured fruit was actually used by it to recuperate in confinement or something. It was too wasteful. He glanced over, only to see that there were still 10 or so fruits on the vermilion fruit tree. Judging by their density, there should have been at least 50 or so previously. Ling Han was furious. He was angry. Shio. The queen bee's body trembled slightly, and suddenly, for sharp spikes left its body, shooting towards Ling Han. So fast. Ling Han hurriedly used shuttle steps to dodge, instantly exploding at twice the speed of sound, just barely dodging these 4 sharp spikes. This was an extreme bone tier attacking, and he had no wish to even try to see if he could block this attack. Without the slightest hesitation, he threw out a weapon Nurturing Leaf at the queen bee. Wang! The tree leaf lit up, transforming into a giant halberd that unleashed a deadly attack. At the same time, the swarm of demonic bees that had initially been completely silent also launched an attack, charging towards Ling Han. That scene of a vast and boundless cloud of bees was enough to make one flustered. He had really expended a lot today. Ling Han threw out another weapon Nurturing Leaf, intending to forcibly carve out a path of blood. He would snatch the honey first. The swarm of bees attacked. Although most of them were blocked by the weapon Nurturing Leaf, even the slightest bit that slipped through the net was enough to give him a headache. Ow, ow, ow. He gritted his teeth. Faced with the attack of blood transformation tears, his physique wasn't strong enough, and he instantly felt needle-like pain. He didn't care. He snatched a large amount of honey with all his might, and after taking about 1/3 of it, he finally hid into the essence nurturing gourd. He looked at his body, and couldn't help but grit his teeth in pain. His clothes were filled with holes, which were naturally caused by the stings of the demonic bees. When he tore off his clothes and looked again, there were also countless needle marks all over his body, leaving behind countless black dots. The stings of the demonic bees were poisonous. Ling Han immediately felt dizzy, and this was still because he had ingested a 100 neutralization pill beforehand. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to last until this moment at all. He would have long since passed out. He took out a 100 neutralization pill and ingested it again. At the same time, he channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique to force out the poison. This time, he had really suffered a considerable injury. There was a large amount of bee poison left in his body, and it was even possible that it could threaten his life. However, thankfully he had the 100 neutralization pill, and he managed to heal himself in time, so there should be no problem. He suddenly discovered that another power had come out of his body, and was battling with the bee poison. The two of them clashed, and both of them were annihilated bit by bit. Realization suddenly dawned on Ling Han. That was the poison of the soul-departing pill. Yeah, fighting poison with poison, the poison of the soul-departing pill was being destroyed. This was a pleasant surprise. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle. Presumably, the person who had concocted the soul-departing pill hadn't expected that he would continue to court death after being hit by such a powerful poison, and allow the demonic bees to sting him, right? He simply suppressed his own mystical power, and had the poison of the soul-departing pill acting as the vanguard to greet the assault of the bee poison. He only protected his body, preventing the bee poison from spreading. As far as the poison of the soul-departing pill saw it, this was its territory. Now that new poison had entered, it didn't care whether it was harmful or beneficial to Ling Han. In any case, it wanted to occupy its territory, so it naturally treated it like an antidote and wanted to counterattack in all aspects. It had to be admitted that the poison of the soul-departing pill was very powerful. Very soon, the poison of the bees in his body was completely dispelled, and the poison of the soul-departing pill itself had only been slightly erased. Nothing else? Ling Han smacked his lips. Then let's do it again. He exited the essence-nurturing gourd and tried to snatch the honey again. However, the two talisman weapons had already expended all their energy. When he appeared, whether it was the queen bee or the other demonic bees, their target of attack was him. Ling Han threw out another weapon, nurturing leaf, without hesitation. Then, he covered his eyes, nose, and ears, and began to plunder madly again. It hurt, it hurt, it hurt. He really wanted to cry out, and was stabbed countless times by their stingers again. This time, he directly snatched 1/3 of the honey, and only then did Ling Han enter into the essence-nurturing gourd. He continued to have the soul-departing pill's poison resist the bee poison. After spending 2 hours, the bee poison was finally completely dispelled, and the soul-departing pill's poison was slightly dispelled. If this continued, he wouldn't even need to concoct the antidote. Again, Ling Han exited the gourd. This time, he rushed towards the vermilion fruit tree. He suffered a mad barrage of attacks, but Ling Han completely ignored them. He was just focused on plucking fruits. In any case, there were only a dozen or so fruits, so it was a piece of cake for him. He was determined to pluck them all. He entered the essence-nurturing gourd again, and felt that the gourd had also been barraged. From the hole above his head, he could see that the scenery was constantly changing. But there was not the slightest bit of impact when he was inside, which showed how amazing this spatial celestial tool was. Being nurtured by heaven and earth, it was naturally even more amazing. It was possible that these demonic bees had guessed that he had hidden inside the gourd. It was also possible that they were only venting their anger, and that was why they had begun to attack the gourd. Thankfully, the gourd showed no signs of breaking. From this aspect, it was much more durable than Ling Han. After a long while, the swarm of bees stopped pestering the gourd, and began to move. The queen bee carried away. The honey carried away. They were finally afraid of Ling Han. Although the vermilion fruit tree couldn't be moved, there were no more fruits. At least, they didn't need to think about it for many years. Ling Han couldn't help but feel vexed. He hadn't completely dispelled the poison of the soul-departing pill yet, so why were they in such a rush to run? He sat down and guided the two poisons to oppose each other again. However, he immediately discovered that the soul-departing pill poison seemed to have already analyzed the composition of the bee poison. At first, they were both annihilated, but in the end, it was actually fusing with the bee poison to strengthen itself. Ling Han bared his teeth and hurriedly ingested the 100 neutralization pill. Then, he used his own mystical power to snipe the bee poison, quickly dissolving the bee poison. Even so, the soul-departing pill still seemed to have strengthened by 10%. Thankfully, it was stopped in the nick of time. Otherwise, it was very possible that the soul-departing pill would reach its original peak strength. In fact, after it had fused with the bee poison, it would produce a mutation of the poison, and it would be even more difficult to neutralize it. He came out of the gourd. This place had already become extremely quiet. Aside from some bee corpses, there was nothing else here. Ling Han walked to Hat Vermilion Fruit Tree. He wanted to see if he could transplant the treasured tree away. Though he could not expect to eat fruits for the moment, in addition to after the Empress and the others coming out, he still needed a great amount of treasured fruits. When Ling Han was observing the vermilion fruit tree, he actually discovered that there were formation patterns on the mountain walls behind this tree. Could it be that it was an ancient ruin behind this? Ling Han's heart instantly beat wildly. If he could obtain some ancient treasures, putting everything else aside, just discovering a medicinal garden would be a great profit for him. This formation patterns were extremely complex, and logically, Ling Han wouldn't be able to decipher it. But the problem was that too much time had passed, and more than 90% of the formation patterns had already been erased, making it no longer powerful. Ancient formation patterns are awesome. Even if it's damaged, it can still show its might. Ling Han mused ruefully. He began to deduce how to unravel these formation patterns, opening a corner so that he could enter. Ling Han made numerous attempts, and discovered that these formation patterns had practically no suppression on him. It was like he was a small shrimp, and the formation patterns were like a net laid out to haul big fish, so he was not being targeted at all. This made things easier. Because the formation patterns were damaged, he could use some forceful means and forcibly disintegrate the formation patterns without worrying about the backlash. Just like that, a day later, he finally destroyed this corner of the formation patterns completely. In fact, he had a feeling that this formation pattern was also erasing on its own. Thus, the combined power of these two aspects caused its collapse to speed up. Gagaga. How many years has it been? Lord Rat has finally escaped. A voice suddenly rang out from within the mountain. Ling Han cursed internally. He didn't seem to have excavated an ancient historical site, but rather a prison. Now, the thing that was imprisoned inside was about to escape. Even if there was still a layer of mountain wall separating them, he could still feel that this existence was overwhelmingly powerful. Pong! He had not even finished the thought, when the cave wall had already split open, and a head poked out. This was a rat's head. However, it was overwhelmingly huge, and was no different in size from a human head. Instantly, the pressure was like a mountain. Ling Han felt suffocated. This rat was far too powerful. It definitely wasn't an extreme bone tier elite. In fact, it may not even be an inscription tier elite. It was as if it could kill him with a single thought. This meant that not only did this rat have a higher cultivation level, but its spiritual power was also incredibly terrifying. Hold on, how could this demonic rat speak? Ling Han had seen a demonic beast that could speak before, and that was Brother Monkey. Otherwise, even if it was the strange little pervert pig, it didn't have such an ability. Without hesitation, he flipped his hands. Pa pa pa. He threw out 3 pillars, locking the hole that the rat had opened. A human child? This demonic rat showed a hint of disdain. Brat, do you think you can trap Lord Rat just by throwing 3 measly iron stakes? You are really too naive. It took a sniff and said to itself, why is the heaven and earth so weak and mystical power so poor? Looks like those few people were unable to destroy the foundations of the Great Formation. However, since Lord Rat can come out, it means that this Great Formation is about to collapse. Damn it! In such an environment of heaven and earth, how long will Lord Rat take to recover to its prime condition? It looked towards Ling Han and revealed a baleful expression. It's been a long time since I've had a snack and had a taste of humans. Now that I've escaped today, it's a good day to have a taste of human flesh. Human. Hurry up and lean your head over. Ling Han channeled Brother Monkey cultivation technique quickly and finally calmed down. He smiled faintly and said, let's talk after you come out. I don't have time to play with you. He turned around and started to run. The demonic rat's cultivation level was unimaginable. It was at least at the inscription tier or even the enlightenment tier. Judging by the rat's tone, it seemed to have come from the ancient age and had been suppressed all this while. Now that it had finally escaped, its abilities were naturally frighteningly high. Right now, the world of cultivation was only at its infancy. However, the cultivation of the civilization of the last era had definitely reached a pinnacle level. If the two of them collided, the cultivation path of the current generation would definitely be shattered. Trying to escape, the demonic rat said disdainfully. With a fierce struggle, it had already wormed out of the mountain wall. Strangely, the mountain wall behind it seemed to be made of water. The hole rippled twice and actually closed back up. The demonic rat discovered that when it landed, there was actually a vast expanse of white fog ahead of it. What sign was there left of Linghan? It's actually a psychedelic formation. The demonic rat gave an "oh," then humphed coldly. It's just 3 formation foundations, and you think it can still trap Lord Rat? Its eyes shone, as red as fire, directly piercing through the fog. Lin, with a single leap, it had leaped out of the formation foundation's encirclement. Then, it sucked with its mouth, instantly forming a terrifying gust of wind. Linghan felt his feet float, and he was almost sucked backward. He was shocked, and hurriedly threw out another weapon, Nurturing Leaf, which slashed towards the demonic rat. He had obtained this sliver of a chance of survival, and once again broke out into a mad run. Shuttle steps channeled, and he ran without any care. The demonic rat stretched out a finger and swiped, and the talisman weapon was instantly sent back several meters. Lord Rat's power has actually fallen to this extent, that even a talisman weapon of extreme bone tier can't be destroyed? The demonic rat let out a shocked exclamation. Damn it! I actually let this human escape. Forget it. I'll recover my abilities first. Once I recover, with the present heaven and earth environment, what existence would be able to withstand a single blow from Lord Rat? At that time, even this human won't be able to escape. Lord Rat's natural talent is digging holes, and I'm the first to run out. All the good fortune here belongs to Lord Rat. In the past, there was an incomparably powerful, majestic empire here. Though it has been destroyed, I am sure that there would be a great many good things left behind. If Lord Rat can obtain the slightest bit of good fortune, even if it is just a cultivation technique, it would be enough for Lord Rat to rise. Linghan sprinted madly, crashing into who knew how many stone pillars on his way. Thankfully, his skin was tough, and the stone pillars would always break, while he was basically unscathed. After running for a long time, he finally confirmed that the demonic rat had not caught up to him. He slowed down, no longer using the shuttle steps, but his speed was still extraordinarily fast. Countless questions surged through his mind. The most fucking question was that he had clearly broken through a formation, so how had he obtained not a treasure, but rather a demonic rat? More importantly, this demonic rat was not the only demonic beast that had been suppressed. There were still some inside, but this demonic rat knew how to dig holes, so it was the first to run out. No wonder when he was breaking the formation, he felt that the formations themselves were also crumbling. As it turned out, this demonic rat was cooperating from the inside. In other words, even without Linghan's help, this demonic rat would still be able to escape. It was just that it would be slightly later, but in that case no one would know about this matter. Linghan ran out of the cave and started to speed up. However, before he reached the warship, the sun had already risen. As a cultivation mania, Linghan immediately stopped and began to cultivate. He believed that he had long since thrown off that demonic rat, so he would not scramble during this half an hour's time. Just as he was about to end his cultivation, he drew on another streak of purple this time. Linghan was certain. Purple chi could only be absorbed in the mountains, because when he had been cultivating in the cave previously, he had not been able to absorb this kind of high-quality energy. Why were there none in the city? In ancient legends, celestials lived on the mountains. Could it be that it was for the sake of absorbing this kind of higher-level energy? Linghan thought for a moment, then took out a few pieces of honey and carried them on his back as an act, then continued onwards. Not long after, the warship was within sight. Linghan! Shenyuan Dingwa immediately shouted upon seeing Linghan. There was a look of relief on his face. He naturally didn't want Linghan to die. Although he would be able to monopolize these 3 modified pill recipes if Linghan did, He believed that cooperating with Ling Han would bring him even more benefits. Ling Han leaped onto the warship and said, "Let's go, let's go. You've already returned, so what's the hurry?" Tang Yu asked with a smile. Ling Han said with a serious expression, "Set off first, and I'll explain slowly." A single person was a very small target, but the warship would be a bigger target. Seeing how serious he was, Shenyuan Dingwa and the others all became serious and hurriedly ordered their people to set out. "Ling Han, what happened?" Qin Xingho asked. Ling Han looked downwards and said darkly, "I seem to have released a terrifying creature." "What do you mean?" the four of them asked. Ling Han briefly related his experiences in the last few days, but concealed the secret of the essence-nurturing gourd. He only said that he was lucky and had snuck all the way to the depths of the cave. He harvested a few vermilion fruits and also managed to snatch some honey. All that was naturally due to the credit of the weapon-nurturing leaves. In any case, this was no longer a secret. Then, he talked about how he had deciphered a formation and released a demonic rat. "You also know formations?" Shenyuan Dingwa and the others all stared at Ling Han, their faces filled with surprise. The direction of your surprise is wrong, right? What I'm telling you is about the demonic rat. I do know a bit about formations, but heavens, you're proficient in alchemy and formations, so why don't you just go to the heavens while you're at it? Shenyuan Dingwa mocked. What, he can concoct alchemical pills? Qin Xingho and the others were even more stunned. They looked at Shenyuan Dingwa, then looked at Ling Han. Only then did Shenyuan Dingwa realize that he had let the cat out of the bag. He hurriedly laughed and said, "TSK, the weather is quite nice today. Shenyuan, don't change the topic." In Xiujing rebuked delicately. The moment this bewitching woman spoke, Shenyuan Dingwa knew that he couldn't fool her anymore, because her ability to pester others was at the Grandmaster level. He said casually, "Ling Han and I opened an alchemical pill shop together." "Just that simple?" Qin Xingho said with a smile, his face filled with disbelief. If Ling Han only knew a little about alchemy, would Shenyuan Dingwa need to open a pharmacy with him? Ling Han sighed. "Don't you guys interrupt. Focus, focus. That demonic rat is extremely powerful. Although it's still in a weak state, the feeling it gives me definitely surpasses the inscription tier," he said seriously. This time, the attention of Qin Xingho and the others finally turned around, and they were similarly solemn. "Are you sure?" "Positive." Ling Han nodded. "According to you, if that demonic rat recovers its abilities, perhaps its cultivation level would be above the level of inscription tier?" Tang Yu asked. "It should be more than that." Ling Han continued to nod, then countered, "Have you guys heard of any inscription tier demonic beast that can speak human language?" The four of them shook their heads. Although His Majesty, the Holy Emperor, was the only one in the world who had advanced to the Enlightenment tier, there were still many elites of inscription tier, and this included some demonic beasts in the primitive mountains. The heavy responsibility of the four great generals was to stand guard at the borders and prevent these demonic beasts from leading troops to invade the Dark North Nation. However, they had never heard of a demonic beast in the inscription tier being able to speak human language. Theoretically speaking, the demonic rat's strength was very likely to be above the inscription tier. A demonic beast in the Enlightenment tier? Then in this whole world, only the Holy Emperor, His Majesty, would be able to suppress it. What kind of terrifying damage would this kind of demonic beast cause when it appeared? "We must immediately return to the imperial capital and report the news." The warship sped up and returned to the imperial capital. After a little more than 6 days, they had returned to the imperial capital. Shenyuan Dingwa and the others immediately went to report to their elders. This matter was too important. In just half a day's time, Ling Han was invited out of the academy by the imperial guards and entered into the imperial palace. Not only was the imperial palace the residence of the emperor and his harem, but it was also the central hub for dealing with matters of the nation. Even if the current emperor was presently in seclusion, dealing with government affairs could only be done in the imperial study of the imperial palace. To cut to the chase, not only was the current emperor outstandingly powerful, but his harem was also extremely shocking. At a rough count, there were at least several hundred of them, and the majority of them were the result of political marriage. The rise of the Dark North nation had led to the conquest of various nations and tribes. In order to stabilize these nations and tribes, political marriage was naturally a very good method. This also caused the number of princes and princesses in the Dark North nation to be astonishing, all of them numbering in the hundreds. He was fertile, very fertile. Led by the imperial guards, Ling Han entered into the imperial palace. After walking for a while, two people walked towards him. One of them was a young man in a full suit of armor. He was handsome, and his entire person was emanating heroic spirit. Gu Xiangming. The other person was a woman. She was exquisitely beautiful, and had an elegant bearing. Ling Han also recognized this person. She was none other than Feng Ruoxian, the daughter of the city lord of Huju City. What a coincidence! When he saw Ling Han, Gu Xiangming's expression immediately changed to one of mixed feelings. He was displeased with Ling Han. He had once wanted to deal with him, but he had not even made his move, and Ling Han had already entered into the Imperial Capital Academy. This had exceeded the scope of his authority. Even if he stretched out his hand, he would not be able to touch him. Subsequently, before he had thought of any good ideas, he heard that Ling had defeated Hu Yang 3 times. He naturally knew who Hu Yang was. He was a 5th change blood transformation tier elite, and was stronger than him. However, this kind of elite had been defeated by Ling Han 3 times. If the first time and the second time could be forgiven, then the third time would be a complete and utter defeat. He had been outmatched by Ling Han in raw strength. This caused Gu Xiangming to completely lose all desire for revenge. He was only a 3rd change, so how could he possibly match Ling Han? Now that he saw Ling Han appear in front of him, he naturally felt disgusted and uncomfortable, as if he had swallowed a fly. Feng Ruoxian, meanwhile, showed a hint of anger. Of course, she was angry. He had once been her father's subordinate, yet now, he had completely turned his back on her and refused to even obey her commands. What an ingrate! In her eyes, it was only natural that Ling Han saved her. Wasn't this something that subordinates should do? But Ling Han wanted to fly solo, and this displeased her, and she saw it as betrayal. She would not allow betrayal. Big brother Ling. Feng Ruoxian broke into a smile, gentle and beautiful, not revealing her inner thoughts in the slightest. Ling Han clasped his hands in greeting. Miss Feng, how many times have I told you? Just call me Ruoxian, Feng Ruoxian said, pretending to be displeased. Ling Han smirked coldly in his mind. He naturally didn't think that Feng Ruoxian would be so familiar with him. Moreover, the reason why Feng Ruoxian had done this was because she wanted to use him as a stepping stone. It was said that there were a considerable number of imperial princes that were interested in her. If news spread out that he and Feng Ruoxian had an intimate relationship, or were even in fact ambiguous in their relations with each other, what would those imperial princes do? It was extremely likely that they would target him in exasperation. A dragon may have 9 sons, and they were all different. What more when the present Holy Emperor had given birth to over 100 sons? How could all of them be prodigies? This woman was really black-hearted. Ling Han saw through Feng Ruoxian's intentions with a single glance. After all, he had not been living for an epoch for nothing. He did not expose her and merely said calmly, "There is a difference between the upper and lower levels. Miss Feng may marry into the imperial family in future, so it would be best for me to maintain a respectful address." Feng Ruoxian was rendered speechless. She hadn't expected Ling Han to be so stubborn. Young Master Ling, the Lord Chairperson of the Council, is still waiting in the Imperial study. The Imperial Guard that had brought Ling Han in said. He could not bear the responsibility of causing a delay. Ling Han nodded and said, "Miss Feng, we'll meet again." He ignored Feng Ruoxian and strode forward. In Feng Ruoxian's eyes, this was another great display of disrespect towards her, causing her hatred towards Ling Han to increase further. There was a layer of darkness on her beautiful face, and she looked a little frightening. Gu Xiangming saw this, and couldn't help but smirk coldly. Looks like there was hope for his revenge. Led by the Imperial Guard, Ling Han soon arrived at the study. Knock, knock. Knock. The Imperial Guard knocked on the door. Enter. A deep voice rang out from within. The Imperial Guard pushed open the doors, then made a gesture of invitation. Ling Han strode in. Though this place was called a study, it was actually incredibly huge. It was practically like a palace. There was a man dressed in crimson robes seated behind a massive study table. He looked to be in his 70s or 80s, and though his hair was already slightly gray, his skin was extraordinarily rosy and smooth. If it was claimed that he was only in his 40s or 50s, there would probably be others who would believe it. This was Yang Bai, the council chairman of the Majestic Empire, an elite of inscription tier. Yang Bai was looking at something and didn't pay any attention to Ling Han. After a while, he raised his head and looked at Ling Han. Shwa! It was like 2 bolts of lightning had flashed past, piercing into one's eyes. So you're Ling Han? Yang Bai stopped what he was doing. I am Ling Han. Ling Han bowed slightly in respect. This was a sign of respect to elites. There was only him and Yang Bai here, and there wasn't even a single attendant. Yang Bai paused for a moment before saying, "Tell me in detail again about that demonic rat." Ling Han nodded and began to explain everything from beginning to end. He had already explained this matter once, so it would naturally be smoother for him to repeat it again. Moreover, this was a real matter in the first place, and he had only concealed some details. A solemn expression appeared on Yang Bai's face, and he asked, "Are you sure that the aura of that demonic rat is no weaker than mine?" Boom! He unleashed his aura, and it was as if an ocean had been expelled. This was a petrifying aura. Ling Han's face was as white as a sheet. The aura of an inscription tier elite was really too powerful. However, he had withstood it. He nodded and said, "That's right. The aura of that demonic rat is definitely not inferior to Lord Yang. Furthermore, it is still in a weak state. When it recovers, it should become even stronger." Yang Bai tapped his finger on the table and said, "The Holy Emperor, His Majesty, has long since predicted that powerful demonic beasts would be suppressed in the various mountains and abysses. However, I had not expected that they would be able to escape so quickly. It's too early. His Majesty, the Holy Emperor, hasn't completed his breakthrough yet." He paused and said, "Ling Han, though the seal was destroyed by you, you have also made a great contribution by discovering this matter. I will keep this in mind." Ling Han nodded. "Thank you, my lord. Go on." Yang Bai waved him off. Ling Han left. He returned to the academy, where there were only a few days left until the new year. He had already passed countless new years, but the significance of this time was clearly different from the past, because this was the first new year that he had spent in a new world. Unfortunately, he did not have the company of the Empress and the others. Xianxia delivered a few pieces of honey to Ling Han. This was what he had obtained in the cave on the first level, but Ling Han didn't take it. Firstly, he had more honey which was higher in quality, and secondly, he didn't want to owe Xianxia a favor. However, he still had a good chat with Xianxia because the modified version of the Qi Return Pill, the Mystical Power Pill, and the Meridian Exploration Pill had already entered the normal sales channel and business was booming. Wasn't he afraid that those alchemists would bring the pill recipes with them and start their own business? Of course not. With General Xianxia acting as the signboard, what alchemist would dare to go against the agreement? Ling Han began a life of earning money by the day, which also allowed him to have enough money to buy the materials to create middle-level and high-level formations. He was going to improve the standards of formations. He bought a few middle-level formations on the trading platform, and Niu Huaqing had already taught him the basics, middle-level formation patterns, and high-level formation patterns. Now, he only needed to learn how to fuse formation patterns. This was the most difficult part. There were endless changes, and a person might not be able to predict all the changes even if he spent his whole life at it. However, this was actually no big deal for Ling Han. It was one matter that his spiritual power hadn't improved yet, but his memory was astonishingly good, and his ability of deduction was also incredibly strong. However, he couldn't spend too much time, as his current spiritual power couldn't support it yet. The middle-level formation, of course, also helped blood transformation tier cultivators cultivate. This was called the 100 Chen formation, and it also expended the jade seeds as an energy source, but its help was far less than the rich man's formation to a meridian opening tier. After all, the higher one's cultivation level, the more difficult it would be to improve. Even a blood transformation tier cultivator was still at the elementary level of martial arts. This required a combination of elementary-level formation patterns and middle-level formation patterns. There was one-on-one fusion, one-on-many fusion, and many-on-many fusion, so the difficulty of carving would increase exponentially. In just 3 days, Ling Han had already mastered this formation completely and created the formation foundations. He had already used this formation to begin cultivating. On the other side of things, there were alchemical pills that could speed up the cultivation of blood transformation tier elites, such as the mystical power pill, but in blood transformation tier it was called the middle-level mystical power pill. However, the ingredients needed to concoct these pills were completely different. As usual, Ling Han began to modify the middle-level mystical power pill again. If he wanted to eat, he would definitely eat the best. Just as he was burying himself in hard work, the new year arrived as expected. The imperial capital was bustling with noise and excitement. The new year had passed, and whether it was the high-ranking officials or the common people, they had temporarily let go of the burdens of their lives and enjoyed a few rare days of celebration. However, it was also during this new year that many terrifying events took place. Several small towns were razed to the ground, leaving no survivors. Because it was something that had happened around the new year, at first, they only knew that they had been cut off from the network, and it was only when people from the surrounding towns had gone over that they discovered the tragedy. The news spread back to the imperial capital, causing a commotion. The present holy emperors might dominated the world, and even the powerful demonic beasts could only obediently withdraw from the nation's borders, not daring to invade. They had already lived peacefully for so many years, but first it was Wuxia city that was destroyed by the beast tide. And now this kind of tragedy had happened. What exactly was going on here? This undoubtedly affected the atmosphere of the new year, but very soon, an inspiring piece of news spread out. The Holy Emperor had come out of seclusion. Had he broken through? No one knew. The Holy Emperor had not spoken, so who would dare ask? Instantly, everyone in the world calmed down. In everyone's hearts, there was an unbreakable thought, and that was as long as the present Holy Emperor was standing guard, no demons would be able to invade the Dark North Nation. Ling Han didn't pay too much attention. After the new year, the tournament at the Formations Association headquarters would begin. He decided to go and be verified as a formation master. To his surprise, this trip was very smooth. He didn't encounter any ignorant second-generation young masters or arrogant formation geniuses. He successfully passed the certification and became Dark North Nation's 4,200th official formation master. All right, the next step was to prepare for the Formation Master Tournament. Theoretically speaking, each city could only send one Formation Master to participate, but the Imperial Capital Headquarters didn't have this restriction. As long as one was certified at the headquarter, they were qualified to participate. Of course, there was another very important condition, and that was one had to be below 30 years old. The 1-month deadline that Ling Han had given Huan Shui had passed. The little handmaiden did not have the slightest hope of discovering a hidden meridian. So Ling Han allowed her to break through to blood transformation tier and gave her 2 vermilion fruits. For a 12 meridians, 1 vermilion fruit was actually enough. However, Hu asked Ling Han to be so rich that he directly gave her 2. 1 was naturally enough, and 1 more was for just in case. The news of villages being destroyed still came from time to time, and judging from the distance, the culprit seemed to be heading towards the imperial capital. This enraged the Holy Emperor. Coincidentally, General Hengtian had returned to the imperial capital to report the results of the investigation of the matter of Wuxia city. Thus, the Holy Emperor sent General Hengtian to quell the chaos. On the 6th day after the new year, Ling Han once again headed to the Formation Association headquarters. He had already registered and was here to participate in the tournament today. Ling Han. A voice filled with surprise rang out behind Ling Han. Yan Jun. The world was so small. Ling Han immediately came to a realization. Yan Jun was originally a formation prodigy from Wuxia city, and together with Tuoba Tianhuang and Zhong Yangbi, They were collectively called the Three Elites. Thus, he should have been selected by Huju City to participate in the formations competition. What he did not know was that because of Niu Weiking's interference, Gu Tianhua had already intended to have Ling Han replace him. However, before he could report this, a beast tide had happened in Huju City. Yan Junyan scoffed and asked, "What are you doing here?" Ling Han smiled faintly. He still hadn't settled this debt with Yan Jun yet. However, he didn't take Yan Jun to heart at all, so there was naturally no need for him to be so fierce to him. In the future, he would just find a chance to stomp him to death. "What is it? Is this place also owned by your family?" he asked calmly. "Don't think that just because you have some accomplishments in martial arts, you can come to the Formation Masters Association to behave atrociously." Yan Jun humphed. He looked disdainful, but in truth, it was unknown how jealous he was. Previously, Ling Han had chased Tuoba Tianhuang off the pedestal and replaced him. Even then, he was only equal to himself and Zhong Yangbi. After all, the three of them represented different fields, but after coming to the imperial capital, though he could still be considered a genius, he had lost the halo of being a prodigy. There were many hidden talents in the imperial capital, and his talent couldn't be ranked in the top 10 at the same age range. However, what about Ling Han? After defeating Hu Yang 3 times, he had risen up strongly, and was already known as the second Hong Tianbu. It was Hong Tianbu, that freak. Faced with that person, even Yan Jun would have to kneel down and admit that he was impressed. That was because Hong Tianbu was also a formation prodigy, and had long since obtained the qualifications of a high-level formation master. It was very possible that he would advance further in a short period of time, and become a grandmaster. In the entire Dark North Nation, how many formation grandmasters were there? 2. So, are you worthy of being called the second Hong Tianbu? Ling Han looked at Yan Jun, and naturally could see his thoughts very clearly. In truth, if his present status was 100, then Yan Jun would only be 7 or 8 at most. The two of them were on completely different levels. There was absolutely no need for him to be angry. He would just find a chance to kill him. "Who do you think you are? What right do you have to stop me?" he asked calmly. "Humph. Today is a big day for the Formation Masters Association. What is an outsider like you doing here?" Yan Jun asked coldly. He knew that Ling Han had already left him far behind, but being able to cause Ling Han some trouble at this time would also make him feel slightly better. "What's all the noise about? Don't you know what day it is today?" A middle-aged man walked over with a displeased expression. "Greetings, Grandmaster Zhou." Yan Junxing hurriedly paid his respects. The other was a middle-level formation master. Though he would definitely be able to surpass him in future, he had just arrived here, and feared that others would make life difficult for him, so his attitude was very humble. This middle-aged man was called Zhou He. Though he was a middle-level formation master, he was a petty character. He nodded and smiled at Yan Jun. This young man would be very successful in future, and he did not want to offend him either. "This guy wants to barge in forcefully." Yan Jun immediately turned around and pointed at Ling Han. Zhou He looked at Ling Han, and a mocking smile appeared at the corners of his lips. He said, "Young man, do you think this is a place for you to watch the excitement?" He only thought that Ling Han had come because he had heard that the Formation Masters Association would be having a competition today. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You two are just talking on your own, but why didn't you consider your own intelligence?" Previously, when he had come to verify his identity as Formation Master, he actually did not encounter the slightest bit of trouble, which was already inconceivable to him. Could it be that his halo of attracting animosity had disappeared? But now he could verify it with his own strength. His ability to attract animosity was still very strong. He practically did not need to open his mouth to make others attack him with all their might. Since that was the case, then let's battle. Thus, Ling Han retorted forcefully. Zhou He couldn't help but feel his expression darken. He felt a little suffocated. These words were too harsh, weren't they? You. He pointed at Ling Han, wanting nothing more than to rush up and strangle Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly. His combat ability was still the same as before. In future, Should he consider cultivating a roar-type technique? From the very beginning, he would be cursing and insulting loudly, which would be world-shaking, thus making his opponent lie down without him even making a move. Out of the way, out of the way. He flicked his hand and continued his verbal barrage. Good dogs don't block the way. Don't be ignorant of even the most basic rules. How dare you? Veins popped on Zhou-He's forehead, and it was as if he were about to spit fire from his nose. Who are you? Tell me, who are you? I'll definitely make you kneel for a day and a night. His name is Ling Han. Yan Jun took the chance and immediately jumped out. Ling Han. Zhou-He was slightly startled. He seemed to have heard of this name somewhere. Forget it. Forget it. What kind of reputation could a young man who was not even 20 years old have? I'll give you one last chance. Kneel or I'll make you regret it, he threatened. Ling Han didn't explain, and he simply quietly turned on the recording function of the optical computer. He then said, Grandmaster Zhou, right? You're indiscriminate, and you're threatening me right from the start. Is this in line with your status? So what? I don't like you, so one want to step on you and suppress you. What can you do about it? Zhou-He said very arrogantly. Ling Han smiled faintly and said calmly, Aren't you afraid that I would have some astonishing background that would stomp you into shit? Fucking what a vulgar guy. Zhou-He certainly looked hesitant. There were many second-generation young masters with astonishing backgrounds in the imperial capital, and he seemed to have heard of his name somewhere before. Could it be that he was really the descendant of some noble clan? He bullied the weak but feared the strong, and did not want to offend any noble clan. However, which noble clan had the surname of Ling? Grandmaster Zhou. This guy is a refugee who has been forced into desperate straits. Yan Jun exposed from the sidelines. How could he allow Zhou-He to be scared off? Although they hadn't spent much time together, he knew that Zhou-He was extremely vicious when he came across people weaker than him. Moreover, Zhou-He would immediately cower whenever he came across someone with a powerful background. He was a typical example of someone who would bully the weak and fear the strong. When Zhou-He heard this, he immediately felt humiliated. A refugee from Huju City actually dared to boast in front of him, almost causing his legs to go weak. I'm going to kill you today. So you're a refugee from Huju City. Hehe. I was almost scared by you. Zhou-He sneered, feeling humiliated and angered. So what if one came from Huju City? Are you looking down on me? Ling Han deliberately tried to worm words out of him. Sure enough, Zhou-He immediately said, A bunch of lowly commoners should all die in the beast tide. Living would only be wasting food. It was enough. Ling Han nodded. Merely these words were enough to make this guy suffer. He suddenly moved and delivered a palm strike right onto Zhou-He's face. Though Zhou-He was a middle-level formation master, his own strength had only just advanced into blood transformation tier, so how could he possibly match Ling Han? With this palm strike, his whole person was sent flying. He somersaulted a dozen over times in the air, and then flopped onto the ground in a beautiful posture. Yan Jun was dumbfounded. Ling Han was still as fierce as he had been, daring to make a move publicly in the Formation Masters Association. However, he immediately revealed a smile. In that case, Ling Han would definitely not be able to escape death. Rebel, are you planning to rebel? Zhou-He jumped up. Ling Han hadn't used much power in this attack. Otherwise, he could have smashed Zhou-He into pieces with a single palm strike. Ling Han dashed over and delivered another slap. Pa! Zhou-He was sent flying again. Insulting a refugee from Huju City, beating you is already a light punishment, he stated calmly. Zhou-He was about to go crazy. Though Ling Han had controlled his power very well, each slap still caused him pain, and he felt like even his teeth were loose. More importantly, this was the entrance to the Formation Masters Association, and there were so many people coming and going here. How was he supposed to face others in the future? You're dead, he said through gritted teeth. If he didn't kill Ling Han today, his surname wouldn't be Zhou. Yan Jun was quick-witted, and had long since gone to call for reinforcements. Wave after wave of people walked out. There were young formation masters who had come to participate, as well as older formation masters who had accompanied them here, and there was also formation masters from the imperial capital. Today would definitely be the liveliest day. It's this brat. Just because he has some abilities, he dares to come to our formation association and act wantonly. Yan Jun pointed at Ling Han and shouted loudly. Instantly, all the formation masters felt like they were united against a common enemy and revealed furious expressions. What kind of person would be so bold to actually dare to bully a member of the Formation Masters Association? To say nothing of Ling Han, even Hong Tianbu wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Ling Han saw that it was about time, smiled faintly and said, "Everyone, don't misunderstand. I am also a formation master." Puff. Yan Jun immediately spluttered. This guy was also a formation master? What kind of joke was that? What did he think a formation master was? Did he think he could become one just because he wanted to? So what if your natural talent in martial arts was high? Did that mean that you would also have some accomplishments in formations? There was indeed such an example, and that was Hong Tianbu, of course. His natural talent in martial arts caused all prodigies to pale in comparison. In fact, he had even reached the standard of high-level in formations. He was overwhelmingly freakish. However, Ling Han definitely couldn't be the second Hong Tianbu. Just because you say you're a formation master, you are? Yan Jun shouted loudly. Ling Han smiled and said slowly, "So if you say I am not, then I am not? Who do you think you are?" He paused, then continued, "This is a very simple matter. Won't you find out after investigating?" "That's right," someone immediately went to do so. "My name is Ling Han." Ling Han kindly reminded. "Even if you're a formation master, that's going too far," someone rebuked. Ling Han shook his head and said to that person, "What would you do if someone cursed the whole city that you came from to die?" That person was at a loss for words at first, then immediately said, "L will definitely slap that bastard." In front of so many people, he naturally had to stand up straight. He couldn't say anything cowardly. Ling Han nodded and said, "Well said." He pointed at Zhou He. This guy had indeed spoken such filthy words. He turned on the optical computer and began to play the recording from before. When everyone heard this, they all shook their heads internally. Zhou He had fallen into his own trap to actually say such words. No wonder he had been beaten. At this time, the person who had gone to investigate Ling Han's origins also returned, and said with a strange expression, "He is indeed Formation Master Ling." Since Ling Han was also a Formation Master, then it was not a conflict between the Cultivation world and the Formations world. It was only an internal conflict. Furthermore, it was obvious that Ling Han was in the right. Who asked Zhou He to say those words? Humph! So what? Yan Jun came back to his senses from the shock that Ling Han was a Formation Master. He called out loudly, "He's a Formation Master. So he can disrespect his superior and beat up a middle-level Formation Master?" Everyone couldn't help but nod in agreement. If everyone didn't abide by the rules, then wouldn't it be a complete mess if they offended their superiors? Ling Han shrugged. "It can't be helped. I am a hot-tempered person." He looked at Yan Jun and bared his teeth in a grin. "You have to be careful." This was a blatant threat. Yan Jun couldn't help but feel stifled. Ling Han was clearly planning to step on him, and it seemed like he really couldn't do anything about it. He was a formation master, and so was Ling Han. In terms of natural talent in martial arts, Ling Han was a few hundred times superior to him. If the two of them came into conflict, whose side would the Formation Masters Association side with? Ling Han walked over, patted his shoulder, and said in a low voice, "Take advantage of this opportunity to take a few more breaths. I can see that in the near future you will be a dead man." Yan Jun's face instantly turned pale. What Ling Han meant was that he wanted to kill him. To be honest, he was definitely no match for Ling Han. In an instant, he made up his mind. From today onwards, as long as Ling Han was still in the imperial capital, he would not leave the Formations Association. Ling Han clapped his hands and said, "The competition is about to begin, right? Everyone, hurry up and go make your preparations. Don't you all want to get good results?" "True." Everyone left one after another. The higher-ups of the headquarters would naturally decide how Ling Han would be punished, and there was no need for them to interfere. Meanwhile, Ling Han operated the optical computer, uploading Zhou He's previous comments onto the web. Didn't they know that he was the ancestor of screwing others over? Everyone entered the Formation Masters Association. This was on the left hind paw on the map of the Imperial City, and the Alchemist Association was on the right hind paw. Beyond that was the boundless mountains and plains, so the Formation Masters Association occupied an extremely large area. They arrived at a place that looked like a training ground. The ground was covered with sand. There were a lot of people, but none of them made a sound. This was the sacred land in the hearts of Formation Masters, and now that the tournament was about to take place here, it naturally made people excited, their blood boiling. Someone had reported the matter of Zhou He, and the higher-ups discussed it for a while. They decided that the competition would be held first, and could not be affected by this. As for the punishment of Ling Han, they could slowly discuss it. In any case, there was no rush. Begin the tournament. The chairperson of the Formation Masters Association was personally hosting the tournament. He was Niu Weiking's senior brother, Chun Hao. The tournament would be conducted through a series of knockout matches. It would be a round of one-on matches, and the victor would advance, while the loser could only come back next year. This was a formations tournament, so naturally they would be contending with formations, and for a formation master, there were actually two main points for the field of formations. The first was to set up formations, and the second was to destroy formations. Thus, if two formation masters competed, it would also be one formation master setting up the formation, while the other would try to destroy the formation, and then they would trade places. Whether they could break through the formation, how long it would take, the difficulty level of the formations they set up, and how long it would take would all affect their results. Thus, there would not be a draw, even if both sides had broken the other's formations or neither had succeeded. There were a total of over 100 formation masters participating, and because of the age limit, they were all elementary-level formation masters. If Hong Tianbu came over, that would break records. He was already a high-level formation master now. Though Ling Han had the ability of a middle-level formation master, he had only managed to authenticate as an elementary-level formation master. The main reason why he was willing to participate was because of Niu Huaqing. Otherwise, it was enough for him to have the title of alchemist. Formations could be used as a trump card, and there was no need to expose it in advance. Half a day later, it was his turn to compete. His opponent was a short man who looked to be in his 20s. "I'm older, so I'll let you go first," the man said. Ling Han didn't mind. With a casual wave of his hand, 17 formation foundations immediately fell. With the communication of his spiritual power, the formation was established. Fuck! Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbfounded. This was setting up formations. How could it be done so casually? With a wave of his hand, the formations had been set up, but the truth was so. The 17 formation foundations linked together, stimulating the power of heaven and earth, and also changing the environment. Originally, this was a battlefield, but from the look of things now, it was covered with clouds and mist, which could be considered a divine miracle. So impressive, this formation was really formed too quickly. Even Chun Hao nodded in approval. He had always believed that formation masters were no weaker than cultivators in terms of battle prowess. In fact, once a formation master unleashed his might, he would be able to stop or even kill a dozen or so cultivators. The problem was, the more powerful the formation, the slower it would be to set up, and the more it had to be set up in advance. This was like waiting for the victim to fall into a trap. But if the victim didn't come, the formations would be useless. Formation masters naturally wanted to quickly set up formations, but the more powerful formations were, the longer it would take to set up formations, and for cultivators, this little bit of time was enough to kill formation masters several times over. A formation master had spent all his energy on formations, and his own battle prowess was actually quite weak. Thus, a formation master was still unable to take on a head-on confrontation. He was more likely to appear as an assisting character, the same as an alchemist. Of course, there were also exceptions. For example, his junior brother, who could set up a formation with a single thought, and could suppress cultivators at the same cultivation level. Unfortunately, he encountered General Vajra, a person who had toughened his physique, and because of heavy injury, he retreated from the imperial capital, disheartened. Aside from him, it was Hong Tianbu. Though he was not very fast in setting up formations, his battle prowess was too strong, enough to support him to slowly finish setting up the formations. However, Hong Tianbu was invincible among his peers in the first place, and in fact, he was close to being invincible even with the gap of a cultivation level between him and his opponent. What need was there for him to use formations to kill his enemies? It was purely icing on the cake. But now he saw a miracle. Chun Hao's eyes lit up. He seemed to have discovered a formation's genius. All of a sudden, his heart was leaning towards Ling Han. He deserved to be beaten. Who asked him to say such words? Didn't he know that there were demonic beasts wreaking havoc and slaughtering many villages? If he said such words at this time, it wasn't impossible that he would be dealt to be an example for others. Ling Han's opponent couldn't help but gape. With a wave of his hand, the formations were completed, so how was he supposed to win? Now, he could only depend on himself to break through Ling Han's formation, and Ling Han would not be able to break through his. Ling Han had set up a psychedelic formation, which did not have much destructive power. Thus, in theory, as long as there was enough time, he would definitely be able to break through the formation. However, this was a tournament, so they couldn't give too much time. Everyone only had 1 hour. If they couldn't break through the formation in 1 hour, it would be considered a failure. However, everyone had learnt elementary level formations before, and the only difference was in their modifications. Thus, it wasn't difficult to break the formation in an hour. The main thing was how much time it took. Formations were different from alchemy. As long as one obtained the recipe for the pill, the alchemical pill concocted by any alchemist would be the same. At most, it would only be a matter of quality. For formations, if one set of formations was given to 100 formation masters, they could evolve into 100 different types. That was because formations were meant to be deciphered, so there would definitely be flaws. These formations were called nodes. Then, every formation master could have their own ideas about where the nodes of the formations would be placed. Thus, even if they knew what formations the other party had set up, it was not easy to find the nodes. If they encountered a killing formation, it was not impossible that they would lose their lives. That person immediately began to break the formation. He stepped into the formation. If he didn't test the formation himself, how was he supposed to find the nodes? After 10 minutes, he revealed a smile. Here it was. He stretched out a hand and inserted the formation foundations into the dirt. 1, 2, 3. Then, he used his spiritual power to communicate with the formation foundations, and this small formation was instantly activated. Though there were only 3 formation foundations, this was called the destructive formation, and its effect was to cut off the power of heaven and earth. Though it could only affect a very small area, as long as he found the nodes of Ling Han's formation, then after cutting off the power of heaven and earth in this area, the entire formation would naturally lose its effect. He was filled with confidence, but very soon, he revealed an astounded expression, because there were still clouds and mist swirling before his eyes. The formation had not been broken. What's going on here? He deduced repeatedly, and then came to a sudden realization. As it turned out, Ling Han had set up another formation within the psychedelic formation, which affected his judgment. Something like that was possible? That person was stunned. The ability to set up formations within formations was something that only a true grandmaster could possess, and now, he actually saw it from an elementary level formation master. How could he believe it? If it was not for the fact that the competition was still ongoing, he really wanted to prostrate himself in worship. I also think that the nodes are there, but why does the destructive formation not work? That's right, I too think that's the case. Why is it ineffective? Everyone was surprised. As the saying goes, bystanders can see better. Furthermore, there was someone walking around in the formation to test the waters, so they could see more clearly. A great many people had already discovered that node 2 to 3 minutes ago, but now it was actually proven that it was not there, which was unacceptable to them. Could it be that that person's destructive formation is not working? It can't be. Just look, the formation patterns have already been activated. So how could it not be? Then what's going on? That's actually not a node. Even some middle-level formation masters were a little confused, because they too thought that that was the key to breaking through the formations. Only the high-level formation masters immediately saw through it and explained the logic behind it. What? Set up a formation within a formation. It can actually be seen in low-level formations? Inconceivable. Heavens. What kind of awesome person is this? In the formation, that opponent wiped off cold sweat madly. There was a formation set up in the formation. The difficulty level of deducing the location of the nodes would increase by at least tenfold. Where? He kept trying, but still couldn't find the correct position. An hour's time passed very quickly. In the end, he did not succeed. The opponent's mouth was filled with bitterness. Even if Ling Han wouldn't be able to break through his formation, how long would Ling Han need to set up the formation? In this aspect, Ling Han was superior to him. Forfeit. He directly gave up. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Good match." In the first round of the competition, Ling Han easily won. Some lucky people passed the first round and directly advanced to the second round. After resting for a while, the second round of the competition began. Coincidentally, Ling Han's opponent was Yen Jun. Yen Jun looked at Ling Han, and his heart was naturally astounded beyond belief. Ling Han becoming a formation master was already unacceptable to him, and when he saw the speed at which Ling Han set up the formation, as well as the way he set up the formation within the formation, he could only stare in dumbfounded shock. How could there be such a freak, and one that was his mortal enemy at that? He hurriedly said, "I'll set up the formation first." Shwa, shwa, shwa. He had already inserted the formation foundations on the sand, and with the stimulation of his spiritual power, the formations were soon activated. This was a killing formation. Yen Jun's intentions were sinister. He wanted to kill Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly. "You, an elementary-level formation master, actually want to kill a blood transformation tier elite?" Had his brain been kicked by a donkey? He strode into the formations, then clenched his right hand into a fist and punched out. Bang! Yellow sand soared into the sky, and the formations were immediately broken. Instantly, everyone's mouths gaped open. Under the crushing pressure of absolute power, there was nothing that could not be destroyed. Everyone was dumbfounded. They were engaging in a formations competition, and you destroyed the formations with a single punch. Should that be considered a pass, success, or failure? The referee did not know how to judge either, and looked towards those higher-ups with a hesitant gaze. This had never happened before because the individual battle prowess of formation masters was too weak. No one could possibly break through formations with strength alone. Yet now such a freak had appeared. Vaguely, everyone seemed to see another person, a monster that should not have existed in this world. Hong Tianbu. Outrageous! A high-level formation master immediately said in displeasure, "We, formation masters, have to use upright and frank means to break formations? So what is this?" "Brother Chow, I don't agree with your words," another high-level formation master said. "The tournament doesn't have any rules about what methods are needed to break the formation. Since that's the case, this is within the range allowed by the rules, so of course, it should be considered a success." Formation Master Chow couldn't help but feel stifled. Indeed, the rules didn't have specific requirements on how to break the formation because firstly, it was a custom, and secondly, a formation master's individual battle prowess was low. Who would use such means to break the formation? He hurriedly said, "A formation master uses formations to break formations? Is there any need to explain specifically?" "I firmly disagree. In fact, I have to propose that this person be disqualified from participating." Ling Han couldn't help but feel annoyed. There was no animosity between them, so why were you targeting him like this? Since the rules do not specify, then it's naturally allowed. The second formation master was also determined not to relent. More and more high-level formation masters joined in on the debate. Some thought that Ling Han should be considered a pass, while others thought that this did not reflect Ling Han's abilities in formations at all. How could he mess around like this? Neither side could convince the other, and the numbers on both sides were more or less equal, so it was really an irresolvable argument. The lower-level formation masters all exchanged looks, gritting their teeth. So many high-level formation masters would actually fight so hard for the sake of a mere elementary-level formation master. For this reason alone, Ling Han could be proud for the rest of his life. Finally, everyone's eyes turned to Chun Hao. Chun Hao waved his hand, and instantly, everyone fell silent. He thought for a moment, then said, "Breaking the formation with force is indeed not in line with the purpose of the tournament." When these words fell, the opposition immediately broke into a smile. However, Chun Hao was still speaking. However, since we didn't clarify this beforehand, we can't disqualify Ling Han just like that. Let him break the formation again. This time, only formation techniques are allowed. Even he, the chairperson, had spoken, so who would dare disobey? Only Yan Jun's expression was ugly. That was because this punch had damaged his formation foundations, causing cracks to appear. This naturally destroyed the formation patterns, so how was he supposed to set up the formation again? He had no choice but to report this matter to the higher-ups. It would definitely be too late to recreate it on the spot. Thankfully, there was a middle-level formation master who was teaching his disciple the same formations, so he lent out the formation foundations which was personally set up by that formation master. Ling Han began to break through the formation. He strode in and instantly killing intent circulated, beginning to assail him. He smiled faintly, not dodging or evading, and allowed the attack to come. How could a meridian opening tier-level attack possibly hurt him? He soon found the nodes, and then used destructive formation to cut off the power to the killing formation. The formation was immediately broken. The entire process only took 3 minutes, which could be considered very efficient. It was Ling Han's turn to set up the formation. With a casual wave of his hand, he still set up a psychedelic formation, and another formation was set up inside the formation. Yan Jun entered the formation and began to decipher it. However, cold sweat soon broke out on his forehead, because he still couldn't find where the nodes were. After a good few minutes, his eyes lit up. He set up the destructive formation, but discovered that the formations were still channeling. It was another false node. He kept trying, but he kept failing. After more than a dozen times, he finally succeeded. The fog dispersed, and he reappeared. However, before he could even feel happy, the referee announced his defeat, because he had spent a total of 40 minutes. Yan Jun was dejected. His greatest confidence came from formations. Previously, no matter how freakish Ling Han's performance in martial arts was, he had always thought that he would not lose. But now, in his area of expertise, he had been ruthlessly defeated, his self-confidence shattered. Yet Ling Han did not even cast a second look at him. What need was there for him to take such a minor character seriously? It was precisely this kind of disregard that caused Yan Jun's hands to clench tightly into fists, as if his veins were about to burst. For better or worse, he was one of the 3 great prodigies of Huju City, and now the other couldn't even be bothered to look at him. So how could he bear with that? Ling Han! Ling Han! Ling Han! He roared loudly in his heart, swearing to avenge himself. Ling Han overcame many obstacles along the way, and it was difficult for him to encounter any opponents that could match him. Although he was only setting up elementary-level formations, there were formations set up within the formations, and the difficulty of deciphering them was 10 times more difficult than a single formation. In just an hour, there were extremely few people who could break through them. When it was close to evening, Ling Han also successfully advanced into the finals. The finals would be held tomorrow. Although it would only be elementary-level formation masters that was competing in the finals, it was still the finals of an annual tournament, after all, so they couldn't be too rash. No one mentioned punishing Ling Han again. What a joke. How could anyone bear to punish such a freakish prodigy? Moreover, who asked Zhou He to have such a toxic tongue? What topic was the most sensitive? The demonic beasts wreaking havoc. Yet, you were still spouting nonsense about this aspect. Wasn't he seeking death? Things were even worse now. He had already been exposed on the online platforms, and perhaps even the Holy Emperor, His Majesty, would know about this. Even if he didn't die because of this, he would still be severely wounded. Under such conditions, who would speak up for him? Ling Han didn't return to the academy. In any case, the finals would be held the next morning, so he wouldn't have to make an extra trip. He was only concerned about the prize. However, this kind of competition was more of an honor, so the prize was not the kind that Ling Han expected, treasured fruit that could increase one's cultivation level or spiritual power. Instead, it was an incomplete copy of a formation technique, and it was a handwritten copy at that. Though it was an incomplete copy, it still possessed great research value. Ling Han also found out who his opponent in the finals would be. That was a formations prodigy from the windward city called Zhong Feiyang. It was said that he was really prodigious. He was not concerned and just flopped down to sleep. The night passed, and when the sun rose, Ling Han naturally woke up to cultivate. However, it was a shame that he hadn't been able to absorb the purple qi when he had completed his cultivation. This should have only be possible in the famous mountains and great rivers. After eating, he slowly walked to the battlefield. Today was the finals, so there were naturally still a lot of spectators. However, they were all formation masters and no outsiders were invited. That was because others would not be able to understand either, especially if they were cultivators. They would only be looking and walking around here and there all this while, and there was no fight. Who would be interested? Ling Han took the field and saw his opponent. Zhong Feiyang was really a young man in high spirits. He was tall and slender, as if he was enshrouded in a layer of divine light. "We'll toss copper coins to decide who will set up the formation first," the referee said. He looked at Ling Han first. "Do you want the front or the back?" "Front," Ling Han said casually. The referee nodded. He threw out a copper coin, and it landed on the ground with a clang. It rolled twice, but it was the back. In other words, Zhong Feiyang was setting up the formation first. Zhong Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Then I won't hold back." His hands moved repeatedly and threw out formation foundations one after another. There were a lot of them, actually over 30 of them, but his speed was not the slightest bit slow. In just about half a minute, the formation foundations were all set up. Subsequently, the formation patterns lit up, indicating that the formation was already working. What formation requires 36 formation foundations? Could it be that it is also a formation within a formation? That's not right. A middle-level formation master suddenly stood up, hissed, and said, "This is the Wild Lightning Formation." What? Those who heard his words were all shocked, because the Wild Lightning Formation wasn't an elementary-level formation at all, but a middle-level formation. What did this signify? Zhong Feiyang was a middle-level formation master. But in the register of the Formation Master Association, wasn't he still elementary level? It's very simple. Though he can create a middle-level formations, he didn't go to obtain certification, so he's naturally still an elementary-level formation master, someone said. This was indeed a very simple logic, but who would be able to become a middle-level formation master and would still be able to resist the temptation of being certified and raise their status? It was just like how a blood transformation tier cultivator and a meridian opening tier cultivator were completely different. How old was Zhong Feiyang? 25 years old, and at 25 years old, he had already advanced into middle level. Aside from Hong Tianbu, who else could compare? Even Chun Hao nodded in agreement. Such a young middle-level formation master was truly hard to come by. It could be said that one would only appear once every 100 years. Forget about Hong Tianbu. That person shouldn't even exist in this world. I really never thought that there would be a middle-level formation master below 30 years old. Even if Ling Han lost, it would not have been for no reason. He encountered a formations prodigy. Everyone was feeling rueful. A middle level would definitely have a crushing advantage over an elementary level. "Do you still want to break the formation?" Zhong Feiyang asked calmly. The Wild Lightning Formation possessed a terrifying destructive power, and even blood transformation tier elites could be killed if they were trapped within. The difficulty of breaking this formation could naturally be imagined. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "All right, I'll give it a try." Everyone couldn't help but be speechless. Was this something that could be tried? Once you entered the formation, as long as the formation didn't stop, the violent lightning would strike endlessly, and it would be extremely difficult to escape. Though the individual abilities of formation masters were inferior to cultivators, once formations were set up, the result would be different. Ling Han strode forwards and took the initiative to enter into the formations. Instantly, lightning flashed and danced between the formation foundations. Then, a bolt of lightning quietly formed, striking fiercely towards him. However, Ling Han was already prepared. He raised his right hand in front of him to protect himself. Crackle! A bolt of lightning struck over. Although it created a blinding arc of lightning, it couldn't wound him at all. This could hurt a third change blood transformation tier, but Ling Han's strength had long since surpassed third change. ZZZ. Lightning was still shooting out from all corners. Ling Han casually brandished his fists, blasting the lightning into sparks. He grasped the pulsation of the formations. This could reconstruct the positions of the nodes. At present, there were not many middle-level formations, only 17 types. Ling Han had dabbled in all of them, so he naturally knew about the wild lightning formation. However, the formations that everyone set up would be modified. When 1,000 people set up a formation, there would be 1,000 different positions for the nodes. Thus, this could only be deduced through the channeling of the formations. In less than 3 minutes, Ling Han threw out the destructive formation. He didn't expect to have a middle-level formation master as his opponent, so he didn't prepare the middle-level destructive formation and still used the elementary-level formation. However, as long as he found the right nodes, he could completely cut off the power to this formation for a few seconds. This was enough, which meant that he had already found the nodes. Schwa 3 formation foundations fell and were activated by Ling Han. Instantly, the wild lightning stopped, but after only a while, lightning flashed again. Pa pa pa, the 3 destructive formation foundations were completely charred. There was complete silence. What? Ling Han had actually deciphered the wild lightning formation? An elementary-level formation master was actually capable of unraveling a middle-level formation? Indeed, breaking formations was easier than creating formations, but it couldn't possibly be so easy as to overcome the gap of a whole level. Unless, this thought flashed through everyone's minds, but they immediately shook their heads. That was impossible. You're also a middle-level formation master. Zhong Feiyang exclaimed in shock. If that wasn't the case, how could Ling Han have possibly broken through his formation? Furthermore, it was only 3 minutes, and even the majority of middle-level formation masters wouldn't have been able to do so. Ling Han smiled and said, "Probably. I haven't deliberately studied this problem. This show-off. Everyone wanted to complain. Was there anyone who didn't know their own strength? How low was the possibility of someone who was completely focused on formations, and then suddenly wanted to go out one day, only to discover that they were already invincible in the world?" Zhong Feiyang took a deep breath and said, "All right, it's your turn to attack." Ling Han nodded and went to the sidelines to retrieve his formation foundations. There were quite a number of them, so it was naturally inconvenient to bring them with him when he was breaking the formation. However, he had to change his strategy. Zhong Feiyang was actually a middle-level formation master. If he used an elementary-level formation against Zhong Feiyang, the latter would probably be able to crack it in a few moves. He reached into the bag. Actually, he was using his consciousness to communicate with the essence nurturing gourd and took out a great many formation foundations. Middle-level formations, Raging Flames formation. With pure strength, he was already unafraid of any blood transformation tier elite, so he naturally wouldn't be interested in offensive middle-level formations. However, he still created it in case of emergencies. He didn't expect it to come in handy so quickly. Ling Han took the formation foundations and returned to the battlefield. Then, he waved his hands repeatedly, and instantly, like a celestial maiden scattering flowers, 36 formation foundations were stabbed into the ground at the same time, and stimulated by his spiritual power, the formation was established. "Please," he said to Zhong Feiyang. Zhong Feiyang naturally wouldn't cower. He strode into the formation, and instantly, raging flames burned, turning the area enshrouded by the formation into a sea of flames. With a casual wave of his hand, 5 formation foundations immediately appeared around him, protecting him. This could only last for a while, but Zhong Feiyang believed that this little bit of time was enough. He immediately began to decipher the formation, searching for the nodes of the formation. Time slowly crept by. Zhong Feiyang tried again and again, yet he failed time and time again. He was indeed a formations prodigy. He had only attempted 11 times, and he had already deciphered this raging flames formation. However, he had also used as much as 13 minutes, so he naturally lost to Ling Han. Ling Han emerged victorious without any argument. Chen Hao was overjoyed. 2 prodigies in a row had appeared in the field of formations, so he, as the chairperson, was naturally pleased. He had someone to succeed him now. After a while, he brought Ling Han and Zhong Feiyang to find Old Man Qi from the Alchemist Association. He wanted to show this old man that even without Hong Tianbu, the field of formations would still have endless prodigies. Ling Han originally wanted to immediately return to the academy, but the Formation Masters Association still had to award him and Zhong Feiyang the certification of a middle-level formation master, so he stayed here for another day. At night, he flipped through the prize he had obtained. This incomplete formation was called Precipice, and the formation foundations were very unique. It didn't use rocks or metal as materials, but formation patterns were directly inscribed on clothes. After wearing it, the formation foundations would automatically activate when attacked, forming a powerful defense. A formation that he could wear on his body. How could this be done? Ling Han's thoughts immediately wandered. Since that was the case, he naturally could inscribe patterns on armor, creating an indestructible army. The upper limit of the Precipice Formation's defenses was as high as Enlightenment tier. However, because the formation was damaged, its defenses naturally dropped drastically, and it could only unleash the might of Inscription tier. This was also extremely shocking, because there was only one Enlightenment tier elite in the whole of the present generation. However, looking at the drawing conditions of the formation patterns, Ling Han couldn't help but be dumbfounded. This was because it required the blood of an Inscription tier elite as ink. Could be a demonic beast or it could be a cultivator. Could it be that Ling Han would have to run over to General Hengtian or General Vidra to ask them for some blood? Whether it was formation techniques or alchemy techniques, after reaching high level, the greatest difficulty was how to get the ingredients. Ling Han put away the formation patterns and put this formation aside for the moment. He'd wait until he obtained the blood of an Inscription tier elite. On the second day, Ling Han was just about to return to the academy when Zhong Feiyang came over and chatted with him for a while. He was filled with admiration for Ling Han's formation skills and wanted to discuss formations with him. Ling Han truly didn't have time, so he politely declined, disappointing Zhong Feiyang. Ling Han couldn't care less. There were really too many things he had to do now. After returning to the academy, Ling Han continued to cultivate diligently. On the way to harvest vermilion fruits, Ling Han had already used the indestructible Heaven Scroll technique to deduce a blood transformation tier cultivation technique. Limited by his cultivation level, this may not be the strongest body art in the world, but with how the world was only at the beginning of martial arts, there should not be any match for the indestructible Heaven Scroll. He nibbled on honey every day, improving the toughness of his physique, and his physical power also increased madly. The mystical power of an ordinary fifth change should be around 1 million kilograms, but Ling Han estimated that his limit should be able to rush up to 2.5 million kilograms, and added with physical power, it should be no problem to reach 5 million kilograms. This power was too terrifying. By then, Ling Han could even lift a medium-sized warship single-handedly. He already had a large amount of money in his possession, so Ling Han began to purchase medicinal ingredients. He wanted to get rid of the poison of the soul-departing pill as soon as possible. If he couldn't get rid of this poison, he kept feeling as if someone had placed a saber by his neck. Students had come to visit, hoping that Ling Han could give a holler and establish a new force. With his present reputation, it was sure that there would be a great many people willing to join under his banner. Yet Ling Han was completely uninterested. After experiencing such a long time in the Genesis world, would he still cling to power? After becoming some gang leader or whatnot, he would definitely be greatly distracted. How could he be as free as he was now? The little handmaiden was still cultivating in seclusion to break through to the blood transformation tier, and didn't even have the time to serve him. Not only was Ling Han slightly unaccustomed to this, but so was that perverted pig who was glaring at Ling Han. This perverted pig humphed at Ling Han, meaning that Lord Pig is hungry. So quickly go and give me something to eat. Ling Han chuckled. Do you want to eat roasted suckling pig? The perverted pig was immediately enraged, and with a sweep of his forelegs, he was just about to charge over to fight Ling Han to the death. However, he had only taken a few steps when he slowed down, panting heavily. Then he collapsed onto the ground, completely exhausted. Ling Han shook his head and said with a smile, Who told you to eat until you are so fat? Just look, your forelegs are as short as can be. The perverted pig rolled its eyes at him. It was just that lazy and gluttonous, so what could it do, bastard? However, Ling Han was indeed a little hungry, so he took out a goat from the essence-nurturing gourd. This was a demonic sheep that he had killed in the mountains. It had the cultivation level of blood transformation tier. Not only did it taste extremely delicious, it was also very beneficial to cultivators. Previously, he had already eaten half, and now there was still half left. After starting a fire, Ling Han began to roast the leg of lamb. Roasted food was the most aromatic. Smelling the aroma, the perverted pig immediately began to drool. Look at how promising you are. Ling Han shook his head sheepishly. The perverted pig pointed a hoof at Ling Han and snorted, meaning, Look at yourself, you're not much better than Lord Pig. Goodish, the sound of a stomach growl was heard. Yet it was neither Ling Han nor the perverted pig. The man and the pig turned their heads at the same time and saw that there was a person sprawled out over the wall of the courtyard. His eyes were fixed on the roasted mutton on the fire, and he was completely focused. Goo, that person swallowed, and it was very loud. Ling Han was surprised. This guy whose stomach was growling in hunger and couldn't help but swallow was actually a young girl who looked to be no more than 14 or 15 years old. However, the problem was that Ling Han didn't realize when she had appeared on the wall at all. If it weren't for that stomach growl, he would have still been unaware. A 14 to 15-year-old young girl had come so close to him. How had she managed to deceive his divine sense? Focus on grilling. Don't burn it. The young girl suddenly spoke up, her voice crisp and clear. Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. Should you be considering this matter? Aren't you going to explain why you're leaning on my wall first? He had countless complaints, but at this moment he didn't know where to start. All right. Ling Han nodded and focused on roasting the leg of lamb. Another few minutes later, the aroma of barbecued meat wafted out, becoming even more alluring. The young girl couldn't help but stretch out her neck, her whole upper body in midair. Then, with a pah, she fell off the wall. She dusted off her behind and got back to her feet, completely unscathed. She was not afraid of strangers. She strode over, sat down, and stretched out her hand to grab the mutton. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh, and asked, Where's your parents? Dead? The young girl said expressionlessly, already holding the leg of lamb horizontally and directly chewing on it. The little perverted pig was instantly enraged. It stretched out its hoof and pointed at the young girl, looking like it was about to fight her to the death. To dare to snatch Lord Pig's meat, she must be tired of living. More importantly, her breasts were still so small. This was what Lord Pig hated the most, bastard. Ling Han looked at the young girl and frowned slightly. This young girl gave him an unfathomable feeling. He could not tell the height of her cultivation level at all. If it was said that she was only an ordinary person, how could she possibly approach quietly without being discovered by him? But to say that her cultivation level was above Ling Han's, that was even more inconceivable. An extreme bone tier elite who was only 14 or 15 years old. Then wouldn't she be even more freakish than Hong Tianbu? If there really was such a monster, wouldn't her name have spread throughout the world long ago? He looked at the young girl who was wolfing down the food and asked, Little girl, what is your name? Little girl. The young girl put down the leg of lamb and cocked her head to look at Ling Han for a while. This old lady is more than old enough to be your mother. What an unlikable little girl. It was said that the mouth that eats the food of others is softened, and she, on the other hand, was actually taking advantage of him. Pa, the perverted pig, tried to leap up and take a bite of the mutton, but unfortunately, its jumping ability was too bad. It fell from the air when it was only 3 inches off the ground, and was still very far from touching the meat. The young girl seemed to be interested, and lowered the meat slightly. When the perverted pig was about to bite it, she raised her hand again, and the perverted pig missed its bite, making her laugh loudly. And she said she wasn't a child. Ling Han didn't ask any more questions, and simply watched quietly. She wouldn't have just come for a meal of mutton, right? After a while, the young girl seemed to have gotten tired of teasing pigs, and casually threw the lamb leg that she had eaten to the point that only a bone was left onto the ground, and said, "Brat, I was the one who planted that weapon-nurturing tree.